Harper Audio presents Crow Dog, 4 Generations of a Sioux Medicine Man. Written by Leonard Crow Dog and Richard Erdos. Read by Matiste. I am Crow Dog. I am the 4th of that name. Crow Dogs have played a big part in the history of our tribe and in the history of all the Indian nations of the plains during the last 200 years. We are still making history. I speak English as it forms up in my mind. It's not the kind of English they teach you in schools. I always think of the story in my mind in my own language. Then I try to put it into English. Our Lakota language is sacred to me. Even now, as I am talking, our language is getting lost among some of us. We are trying to bring our old language back, trying to purify it. So now I'm telling my own story in my own way, starting at the beginning. It's a medicine story. White historians say that we came over from Asia when ice covered the Bering Strait so that one could walk over it. We do not believe this. Not only us Lakotas, but nearly all the Native Americans on this turtle continent. If there was any crossing of people on the Arctic ice, it was the other way around. From Alaska to Asia. We were always here. We came from this earth. We were put here for a purpose by Wakantanka, the Creator. We were put here in the center of the world, at the center of these United States. Look at a map. Rosebud, our reservation, is smack in the middle. My story is a spiritual winter count of our people. We Lakota didn't come from another nation or country. We came from across the Missouri, from 3 daybreaks and 3 nights away, from the east. And we Lakota claim this land. It belongs to us. Before that, so long ago that we can hardly remember it, we came from the land of the Great Lakes. We were then a lake and woodlands people. Then the French gave guns, matchlocks, to the Ojibwe. We had only bows and arrows, so we were pushed toward the west. It was not the Ojibwe's fault. It was the white men who started the fighting among the tribes, who pushed Ojibwe onto Lakota land and Crows onto Cheyenne land, Crees on Blackfoot land, always pushing the tribes westward to make room for himself, push them with guns and cannon, pile one tribe onto another, stopping only when they reached the Western Ocean. So for a while, the Great Prairie became our hunting grounds, and we turned into a prairie people, a nation of the Great Plains. We need space to roam, to ride. We are a teepee people, but we are not drifters. We try to stay on our own ground. When the grandfathers had the buffalo and owned this land, all our dreams and beliefs and sacred sites were centered here. The Wasichu, the white man, always talks about those murderous Sioux, always on the warpath, killing settlers, burning and scalping. But that is not true. We were and are a peaceful people. Wolakota means peace. We even welcomed the Wasichu. Only when we saw them building roads through our land, wagon roads at first, and then the railroad, when we watched them building forts, killing off all the game, committing a buffalo genocide, and when we saw them ripping up our Black Hills for gold, our sacred Pahasapa, the home of Wankinyan, the Thunderbirds, only then did we realize that what they wanted was our land. Then we began to fight for our earth, for our children. That started what the whites call the Great Indian Wars of the West. I call it the Great Indian Holocaust. It began with some of our Eastern Dakota cousins, the Sisseton, Santee, Wapetans, Yanktonais. They lived in Minnesota. The government, which had taken their land, had promised to feed them. But corrupt white agents stole the food and other supplies. The Dakotas were starving to death. The white superintendent told them to eat grass. That started what the whites called the Great Sioux Uprising, the revolt of a desperate, dying people. Out of the prisoners the army took, 38 Dakota warriors were condemned to death and hanged. They sang their death songs. Then the last of our eastern tribes were chased across the Missouri and beyond. It was a killing time. Many hundreds of our people and of the Cheyenne were exterminated. Most of them old people, women, and children. They were easy to kill. As one colonel, who was also a clergyman, told his soldiers, "Kill 'em all, big and small, nits make lice." After the Lakota and Cheyenne had wiped out Custer, the soldiers swarmed over our land. So many buffalo were killed that they became almost extinct. They had been our main food. Then we were driven onto the reservations and fenced in. I can trace my ancestry back for 9 generations. We Crow Dogs had always had the earth ear, Makananggeya, having the whole earth for an ear. It means you know what's going to happen before it happens. And I have my spirit computer, Inyandonka, the ancient rock computer, a finding stone. So I have the rock spirit in me, and I have the Wakiksuyapi, a special memory, a hotline to the spirits, the remembrance of long-dead relatives, the understanding of signs. Also, I can speak the Lakota language as it was spoken hundreds of years ago. In my dreams, I can speak to my ancestors. I carry our history inside of me. My earliest ancestor was Matomani, Walking Bear. He got his name because he was hunting all the time. He had 2 wives, a Lakota and an Arapaho woman. He had a son and daughter. The son's name was Mato, Bear, just Bear. He took after his father and did a lot of hunting. He had a charm that brings the animals to you. And there was Matokangi, Bear Crow. This one had 3 wives who gave him 4 sons. The first was a Lakota woman, the second a Cheyenne, and the third was from the Pawnee Nation. 2 of Matokangi's sons were spiritual, what the white man calls medicine men. We had many of them in our clan, our Tioshpaye. We are medicine people. Going farther back, there was Matoshunka Manitou, Bear Coyote. He was a great warrior. He was a Tukala, a member of the Kip Fox Warrior Society. The Tukala had a song. I am a fox. I am supposed to die. Whatever is dangerous, let me do it. In battle, the Tukala didn't care whether they lived or died. That gave them an edge. My father Henry tells it this way. It started with that damn cow. It belonged to a Mormon passing through with the wagon train. That cow strayed. A young man, high forehead, shot it. Then they butchered it. It wasn't much of a feast. That cow was nothing but skin and bones and hard chewing. The Mormon went to the soldiers' fort and made a big stink. There was this Lieutenant Grattan. He was the kind of Wasichu who has an Indian for breakfast every day. He said, "With 30 men, I can ride over the whole Sioux nation." That's what he said. So this fool Grattan went to the Indian camp. Conquering Bear, whom they also call Brave Bear, was the chief there. He was my grandfather's uncle. He belonged to our Tioshpaye. That's why it all starts here. Grattan told the chief he must give up the man who shot the cow. Conquering Bear told him he couldn't give up the man because he was Minikanju, not a Brule. Also, he did not want to give up High Forehead to be put in a tiny cell inside a prison. Why all that trouble about an old, broken-down cow? Grattan came up with his soldiers and 2 cannon. He shot up the Indians' camp. One of the cannonballs killed Conquering Bear. Then the warriors got mad and killed Grattan and all his men. The first one, named Crow Dog, was in that fight and counted coup. This happened in 1854. So from there it starts, Crow Dog history. Old Man Crow Dog, the first of that name, was a buffalo hunter. He knew the ways of the buffalo and of the animals in the forest. He was born in 1836 and died in 1912. A government paper says he was born earlier, in 1832. Maybe so. Before he took on the name Crow Dog, he had 6 other names. One of them was Matusisha, Bad Bear. Our shield design, our Wotawe, stands for the 2 arrow wounds and 2 bullet wounds the first Crow Dog received in battle. All the wounds were in front. From the first fight, where he was hit by the arrows, he got his final name. Before that, he had a bear name. He then took the name of Kangishunka Manitu, or Crow Coyote, not Crow Dog. The interpreter misunderstood it. His Lakota was poor. It should have been Crow Coyote. The coyote was my great-grandfather's sacred animal. It has to do with wounds he received in a fight. Without the coyote, he would have died, and it would all have ended right there. One time, Crow Dog took a war party north to Cedar Valley. The party was made up of young men from the Kit Fox Warrior Society. They are the sash wearers who pin themselves to the ground and fight it out where they stand. But Crow Dog did not go out to fight. He went for a ceremony he wanted to hold at that place. He went there for a vision. The young men he took along because this was close to Crow country. The Sioux and that tribe were at war most of the time because the Crow worked for the white soldiers as scouts. So that party was out and roaming. Crow Dog's horse raised its ears forward, and the 2 eagle feathers my great-grandfather was wearing caught the wind, and the feathers began to talk, telling Crow Dog, "There are enemies over there, behind those hills." So they all stopped. Then Crow Dog sent 2 young men ahead to find out, one to the north and one to the south. Soon the scouts were back. They had not seen anything. The wind, the feathers, told Crow Dog that something was wrong. He told his men, "We'll camp right here." He also told them, "Put the teepees right up to the river bank, so that the horse riders can't go around, so that one side of the river will be your shield." They did this. They put up the camp so that nobody could run a circle on them. But still the eagle feathers did not stop whispering. Then a coyote whooped 4 times. Crow Dog understood that the coyote was saying, "Something is going to happen to you." Just as it was getting light, a large party of crows rode up, coming from behind. They had found a ford upriver. Suddenly, there they were. Hollowhorn Bear was with Crow Dog that day, along with Hollowhorn Bear's son, and Kills in Water, and Kills on Sight. Kills on Sight was wounded early on. He was hit bad. They unhorsed him. 2 crows came at him from both sides. Crow Dog came up at a dead run and killed the 2 crows. In the meantime, 2 more crows went after Crow Dog. He had his hands so full with the others, and with helping Kills on Sight, that he had not even noticed them. As he turned around, they were already very close. They had bows. Crow Dog took 2 arrows, one below the collarbone and one in his side. That one went into his water bag, his bladder, but it didn't really penetrate. The one under his collarbone was the bad one. It went very deep and he couldn't pull it out. He could not fight well with that arrow sticking out in front, so he broke it off at the point where it went into his body. He had dismounted to help Kills on Sight get onto his pony, and now he got on his own horse again. They came at him from front and back. Crow Dog had a sacred warrior stick, a coup stick. One end was crooked, and the other end had an iron spear point. He used that on those crows. More crows went after him, but he got very weak from his wounds. A large part of the arrow with the point was still in his body. The point was barbed, and pulling only made it worse. He fell off his horse. He couldn't do much then. I'm not going to make it, he thought. He was looking death in the face. The crows left him where he fell, thinking that they had killed him. Crow Dog crawled under some stinkwood bushes. Then he blacked out. He couldn't move. He lay like that for a long time, for days even. He was thirsty but had nothing to drink. He was too weak to make it to the nearby creek. He was cold inside and outside. He wasn't even sure that he was still alive. Then he heard the coyote whooping. "Ooh! Ooh! Crow Dog, I am coming. Human being, listen. I am coming over." Pretty soon that coyote came and cuddled up to Crow Dog and warmed him. He whooped like one coyote speaking to another. "Ooh, Crow Dog, I have come to doctor you. I brought you a special kind of sage. Pick it up. Doctor yourself with it." Crow Dog had the wolf and the coyote power. He could understand their language, understand it spiritually. Then a second coyote came, and then a third, and finally the fourth. This one told Crow Dog to eat that special sage and to roll up some of it in a ball. And the coyote carried that ball of sage in his mouth and went to the creek. He dipped it in the water and soaked it, and brought it back that way to Crow Dog, who used it like a sponge, drinking the water, and when it went dry, the coyote carried it back to the creek and soaked it some more and brought it again and again to keep Crow Dog from dying of thirst. One of the other coyotes brought Crow Dog taopi tawote, wound medicine. The coyote chewed it up into a mulch and told Crow Dog to put it on the spot where the arrow had gone in. It made the flesh tender so that Crow Dog could pull the point out. And he put the same medicine on the wound in his side, and it began to heal fast. On the fourth day after the coyotes had come to help, they made Crow Dog understand that he was well enough to walk. They whooped, indicating that he should follow them. The coyote scouted ahead for Crow Dog, warning him if enemies were close by. And a crow appeared, caw-cawing, flying ahead, also showing the way. Crow Dog followed that bird, and followed the coyote's tracks on that spiritual trail, followed them all the way home to his people's camp. When Crow Dog came back, the tribe honored him with Okisisi Wasipi, a warrior dance, and a Waktegeli Wasipi, a men coming back in one piece after killing an enemy dance. After returning from death to life, Crow Dog changed his name to Kangi Shunka Manitu, meaning crow coyote, in order to honor these animals who had helped him to survive. But years later, those damned census takers misunderstood it. Maybe their half-blood interpreter mistranslated it, and they put his name down as Crow Dog. He grumbled for a while, but now we are proud to be called Crow Dog. Now, about the 2 bullets Crow Dog took. He was a little over 40 years old, maybe 45 or 6, when he was in the Custer fight. Not much is known of what he did there. He might have been wounded early in the fight, or there could have been some other reason. We just don't know. Spotted Tail was the head chief of the Brule at that time, and he forbade his men to leave the reservation to make war upon the white soldiers. He was Crow Dog's cousin, and had been a great warrior once. He had often fought side by side with Crow Dog. But then the whites had taken him prisoner and brought him east where he had seen big cities with their crowds of people. And when they let him go back home, he was no longer a warrior. He told the people, "There are too many Wasichu to fight. Don't leave the reservation." So those men who left and joined Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull did it secretly and did not talk much about it. After the Custer fight, Sitting Bull took his Hunkpapas to Unsimakochi, grandmother's land. That's Canada. Crow Dog and a few others went to join Sitting Bull there. They told the people on the reservation that they were going hunting. But what they really wanted was to join Sitting Bull, to honor him. On the way they came across a lone buffalo bull, but they did not kill him. Crow Dog told his friends, We are going to Sitting Bull, so we're not going to kill and eat tatanka on this journey. We will eat deer instead. So they went hunting, and every day they brought back 2 deer. They stopped at a place called Holy Medicine Rocks, where Sitting Bull had held a sun dance just before the Custer fight. There Sitting Bull had received a vision that the white soldiers would be defeated. These medicine rocks are covered with designs scratched into them, figures of men, horses, and buffalo. These holy rocks are now part of a Montana ranch. It was near Medicine Rocks that Crow Dog ran into a party of white soldiers. Crow Dog tried to talk to them in sign language, but they didn't understand it and opened up on him with their guns. He was on his horse riding without a saddle. Crow Dog took 2 bullets, one in his belly near his groin, and the other I am not sure where it hit. I was a young boy when my father told me, and I forgot. Crow Dog had a fast horse and made it back to camp. There a medicine man named Sitting Hawk took care of him. Sitting Hawk told Crow Dog, "I am not going to try to take them out because that would kill you. You will carry these bullets until the day you die. Someday, you will go back to this earth, and long after your body has turned to dirt, these 2 white man's bullets will remain there in your grave. They'll be the evidence that you fought for your people. So I'll leave those bullets alone, but I will put a medicine into you that will help you." And that is why Crow Dogs use the sign of 2 arrows and 2 bullets. The 1880s were years of thin grass and little rain for the Lakotas. In summer there were droughts. Prairie fires ate up the grass and the trees. The winters were so cold that trees cracked apart and men's bones ached. The snowstorms never stopped. These were hard times for white ranchers and farmers too. During the great blizzards of those years, all their livestock froze or starved to death. The whites could leave and try their luck somewhere else. The Lakota, stuck on their reservations, could not. We had been forced to sign away the bigger part of our reservation. Our sacred Black Hills had been taken over by gold diggers. The land left to us was the kind where nothing grows. On the Cheyenne Reservation, people were dying of hunger. At Rosebud, only half of the children survived. They were too weak to fight the whooping cough and diphtheria the white men had brought. The kids' legs were as thin as sticks, their eyes hollow and their bellies swollen. Some people died of hopelessness. The government picked this time to cut our rations. The beef issue at Pine Ridge by 1 million pounds. At Rosebud by 2 million. And even part of what little food did arrive was stolen by thieving agents. One commissioner reported that the Sioux have fallen into a state of consternation, like men on an ice floe that is about to break up. We were so hard up that men ate up the seed corn and butchered the stud bulls upon which their survival depended in the coming years. On January 1st, 1889, there was a total eclipse of the sun. It caused great fear among the Indians, who thought that the sun had died and that the end of the world had come. They were just ready to give up. In Nevada, more than 1,000 miles southwest of Rosebud, a Paiute holy man and dreamer named Wovoka had a vision. He told his people that when the sun died, he had gone up to heaven, and there he met God, and all the people who had been dead for a long time. And God told him to go back to life and tell the folks on his reservation to be good and love one another, and not fight or steal or lie. And he brought with him from heaven a new dance and a new song that would bring the buffalo back and make everything all right again. This new dance and new religion was the ghost dance, and Wovoka became its messiah. His message spread like wildfire from tribe to tribe. A man came in the dark of night and told Crow Dog, "A new world is coming. It will roll on top of this one, which the white man has spoiled like a carpet. Oyate Ukia, Hoyate Ukia, a nation is coming. The message was one of hope. The white world would be buried, or some said rolled up, and underneath, or on top of it, would reappear the beautiful world of the grandfathers. This message was rain for thirsting souls. Near the White River, at the point where one road goes to Rosebud and the other to Parmalee, there my great-grandfather ran a ghost dance. The circle hoop is still there. On a nice summer day, you can still make it out. At that spot, an old man named Black Bear fell into a vision world of the ghost dance. As Black Bear lay on the ground, the rest of the people continued to dance. After a while, Black Bear got up on his feet and faced north with his arms and hands outstretched. And in plain daylight, the people saw a little flash of lightning in his hand, like a small looking-glass. The ghost dance leader went over to Black Bear and smoked and fanned him off with sweetgrass. He saw that Black Bear held a small shining rock, the kind of rock that couldn't be found on Earth, a moon rock. And dancers came out of their trance with spiritual food in their hands, moon flesh and star flesh. There still hovers around that place a smell of burning sweetgrass. Old Jerome Crow Dog joined the ghost dance. He liked that new way of praying, of relating to the spirits. He became a leader, and many of our people followed him. When the soldiers ran all over the reservation, trying to put down the ghost dance, Crow Dog took his people way out into the Badlands, where the whites could not follow them. Crow Dog started his ghost dance by having a woman shoot 4 sacred arrows into the sky. They had points made of bone dipped into buffalo blood. In the end, as many as 3,000 people danced with Crow Dog. It was hard for them to stay in the Badlands. Winter was coming on. It was cold with a lot of snow on the ground, and they had only skimpy canvas teepees for shelter. They had no food except for whatever white ranchers' cattle they could find and butcher. But the Badlands were the only place people could still ghost dance. Up at Standing Rock, the agent sent his tribal police to kill our great holy man, Sitting Bull, for protecting the ghost dancers. Everywhere people were running away from the soldiers, who they were afraid might kill them. The government sent soldiers and interpreters to Crow Dog's camp, telling the people to return to the reservation, or they would be wiped out. A warrior named Two Strikes said, "They will do it. They have already killed many of us. I have a cannon. We have women and children here. I will not see them die. I will take them back to the reservation." But another warrior named Short Bull and his men pointed their Winchesters at the whites. And even at Two Strikes shouting, "Kill the Wasichus! Kill all who want to go back!" So here were Lakota men, facing each other with loaded guns, ready to shoot. And the soldiers were ready too. It was only a matter of seconds before the blood of many men, women, and children would be painting the snow red. It was then that Crow Dog did a great thing, maybe the greatest in all his life. He sat right in the middle between the 2 rows of men screaming at each other, and pulled a blanket over himself. There he was, a little heap in the snow, singing softly to himself. They all, whites and Indians, kept staring at this blanket with the man under it. They did not know what to make of it, but they all calmed down. They lowered their guns. They kept staring at that little heap, wondering what Crow Dog was going to do. At last Crow Dog threw his blanket off. He said, "I will not see Lakota kill Lakota. I will not see my people butchered by the soldiers. You can kill me if you want to. The soldiers or Short Bull, it is all the same to me. I am not afraid to die. But while I live, I will try to save these women and babies. I will take them back to the agency." Then Crow Dog and Two Strikes marched their people peacefully back toward Pine Ridge. In the end, only Short Bull was left standing there clutching his Winchester. Then he went too. Thus Crow Dog saved the lives of 1,000 people. In the same month of December, 1890, the soldiers massacred hundreds of Sioux men, women, and children of Bigfoot's band at Wounded Knee, leaving women with babies nursing at their breasts, dead in the ditch. They had no Crow Dog to save them. After the ghost dance, my great-grandfather lived quietly with his wife. He went back to the teepee rather than live in the tiny log cabin he had built years ago. One day, in September 1912, when Crow Dog was going toward Rosebud, he got sick all of a sudden and died. From that day his wife lived alone, but she and Crow Dog had already prepared. She had asked him where he wanted to be buried, and he had answered, "Wherever they will accept me." After he died, the Catholic priest came and accepted Crow Dog. He had a good funeral. His wife had told him before he passed away, "Old man, when you die and get buried, I'll tell them to leave a space next to you. So when I die, we'll lie there together as we did in life. All the hardships that you went through, I will follow you. I'll do that much for you." And when the old woman died, they put her right next to him. My father summed it up. Jerome Crow Dog was a great man. He was always using what the white people call symbols. And we have taken after him in this. He wore an old coat a missionary had given him, but over his shoulders he always had an Indian blanket. This meant he had to walk the white man's road while remaining a Sioux in his mind. And he also wore a white man's hat with a visor, a woolen hat, something like a beanie, but he stuck an eagle feather on its top. He told me, "This cap means that we live under Wasitu now. But the eagle feather means that we won't be white manized, that we'll be Indians forever." The second Crow Dog's name was John, Henry's father. He too was something of a loner. As Henry told me, "Johnny Crow Dog doesn't worry about anything, just himself and his family. He doesn't worry about who's big chief, or who eats plenty peyote, or who smokes too many pipes. He keeps out of tribal politics. He's a First World War vet. He's that kind of man." He didn't talk much. He was a quiet man. John tried peyote once, in Macy, Nebraska. That was in 1920. But he didn't join the Native American church. He told them, "You eat peyote, that's good. But I am a rough man. I do things my own way. I am not a man who goes to meetings and mingles." John Crow Dog lived by himself. He had no education. During Prohibition, he was a moonshiner. Another reason why he lived way out by himself. One time he went east with the big circus, together with two brothers. He was a spin roper. They had to play act the Custer fight and attack the Deadwood stagecoach. They had to play cowboys and Indians. Among the other Indians in the show there were Thunderhawk, Standing Soldier, and Iron Eagle. John said that Buffalo Bill had been a fair man who paid them well and was friendly to the Indians. He drank a lot of whiskey out of an extra big glass. He told John that Sitting Bull had once been in his circus and right here on Broadway had given nickels and dimes to poor white children who had been begging. Grandpa John brought back a poster with a picture of all the Indians riding around on their horses. Somebody read the headline to me. It said, "The Indians were the wildest, most wondrous riders on naked steeds." When John went east, he met a white woman there. She came out to Rosebud with him. He took her to the mountains and stayed there with her for a while. She hung around for close to a year, but life on the reservation was too hard for her. So John left her and she left him. But before she went away, he gave her $500 from his lease money. John lived like a badger, alone. but he had his pipe to pray with. He wasn't cut out to be a model family man. He always said that when he died, not to put him in a cemetery, but to bury him someplace on his own land. He lived at the old orphan band camp at Uppercut Meat. He trapped beaver and got prairie chickens for food. He dug the charming medicine. Use it, and the deer come right up to you. A hunter is quiet, lets other people do the talking. If you talk too much, you spook the game. Henry went often to John's grave and always placed a rock there. Each Veterans Day, we put up a flagpole for him, and wherever John is, he knows that we remember him as a son and a grandson. I want all this put down. I want my children to have a legend. It is important that they know the history of the Crow Dog generations. My grandmother's name was Tamapia Washtewin, Mary Good Cloud Woman. Grandma couldn't speak English hardly, but she understood some. She could do some reading and writing. She read the government letters and explained them. That was a strange thing for an Indian woman to do then. Some relations made fun of her for this, but she really helped. She was a hard-working woman, lending a hand with anything. She'd chop wood, haul water, do the gardening, dig wild turnips and dry 'em up, plant corn, do the washing, bead moccasins, fix up clothes for the whole family. She was a woman who did everything every day. I look at the girls coming up now. They don't do it anymore. They haven't got the strength. Grandmother Good Cloud Woman was strong-hearted. My father Henry loved to recount his life story. I have it on tape. He said, "Let me tell it in my own words. Don't put it in fancy language. My mother's name, John's wife, was Jumping Elk. After they were married a while, my mother told John that there was going to be a baby. I wasn't born in a hospital. I was born in the old way. John called on 4 older women, 50 to 60 years old, who no longer have their moontime. They gave my mother 9 small red sticks, like from a matchbox, and she put them in a little parfleche. An older lady makes this. Every month you put one of those little sticks in there. They already know whether it's going to be a boy or a girl. If the moon opens up like a sickle, toward the left, it's a girl. If it's curling up a little downward, it's a boy. If it's a half moon, that means twins. Now it's birthing time. 2 elder women watch Jumping Elk. They have a tanned deer hide and 2 crutches, about a foot long, and 2 small stakes. The medicine woman wraps a rawhide belt around the birth giver, wraps it around her waist. There are holes in the rawhide to tighten it like a belt. Jumping Elk pushed herself. She's not lying down like a Wasichuwinya. She's kind of squatting. The medicine woman gives her an herb that helps. Then the older women press with the belt. Before the pains come, one woman has 4 sticks. Every pain she cuts a short stick. My mother grabs onto a large birthing stick and holds on. She pushes 3 times. The 4th time, the baby comes out. They catch me on a tanned white hide. There's a bowl and water and sage. They wash me and scrape the gook off me with a bone knife. The old lady sticks a finger into my mouth and pulls it out. Then I begin to cry. If I had not cried, the woman would have slapped me on the back until I did. That's how I was born. That's how we all were born. Now they go to the hospital. The old way made you feel good. The world I was born in, it was Wasichu's world. I wished I had been born 100 years earlier. There were no buffalo anymore, no games, nothing to be happy about. We were starving. The people lived on timtsila, wild turnips, berries, roots, and drank water. That was all. As for game, we ate anything we could catch. Gophers, muskrats, squirrels, anything. The family that ate medicine roots had power. If you dreamed of an eagle, you had to follow that faith, eat gray grass. If you eat that, chew that, you feel better. You could find that gray grass and drink water after. That filled you up. You could make your way with it. My father taught me everything I need to know. He didn't talk much. He just did it and made a motion like, "You saw me doing this, now you try it." He taught me how to use white man's tools, saws, drills, crowbars. I worked for a while for the railroad, laying track. From 1934 to 1950, I worked in Nebraska, harvesting, shucking grain, digging spuds, picking beets. I made $2 or $3 a day. They call it migrant labor now. I was camping near St. Francis, doing WPA work. But the priest heard me having an Indian ceremony, heard the drumming and singing, and chased me away. On our allotment there was nothing. First we lived in a tent. I built my own house with my own hands. Without money, nobody helped. I built it from wooden crates, logs, packing paper, old car windows, pieces of corrugated sheet iron. I found a big iron stove that a white man had thrown away. Found an old door from a wrecked place. But it was a cozy home. I took care of my own. I have white friends. They are good people. Man to man I can relate. But white Americans as a whole, that's different. The white man made me a surplus Indian. I couldn't digest the white man's ways. They made me sick. I am a truant from school, a truant from life. I am a truant from the white man's life into the spiritual life. They cut me in half, a white man's half and an Indian half. Now when I'm old, I try to put the halves together, because though I'm a full-blood, I have to live in the white man's world. Under that system, I need a doctor, a lawyer, a policeman, a judge, a psychiatrist, a pill, and lots of money. We didn't need such things when I was a kid. To tell the truth, now I need only my pipe. To hell with all the other stuff. Why did the white man come here? Why did Custer steal the sacred Black Hills from us? White men are crazy about gold. They have gold-rimmed glasses, gold watches, gold teeth. They are always rooting around, tearing everything apart, digging, digging, digging. They tore up the whole Black Hills to find gold, silver, and precious stones. Now they're after gas, coal, oil, and uranium. You can see the big trucks with the nuclear stuff coming through here from the Black Hills. We got to civilize the white man because he has gone crazy. People would listen to my father for hours. He led a hard life, but he did not let it conquer his spirit. Under all the poverty and suffering, he was proud of who he was. He spoke of the royalness of our bloodline. He told me, "We are the born government of this turtle continent, physically and spiritually. They call us Aborigines because we are the originals on this earth. The Crow Dogs are royal blood, that is full-bloods. We are the people of the center." My father held onto our land, our allotment, which he named Crow Dog's Paradise. He never sold the land, even when he was starving. He never dressed up. He always wore the same floppy pants and out-of-shape hat. But it was different when it came to his dance outfits. They were beautiful, and he made them himself. He was the greatest eagle dancer our tribe ever had. Watching him, you forgot that it was a man dancing, not a bird. Henry Crow Dog was born on September 2nd, 1899. He died in the winter of 1985. He was still in very good shape for his age. It was night. The snow was deep. It was very cold. He went to visit my sister Diane, who lives only about half a mile from us. We didn't notice him going out. We had a crowd of relatives staying over that night. He didn't know that Diane had gone out and that her door was locked. They found him lying at her doorstep. He might have had a heart attack or simply frozen to death, or both. It was as he always had said, "I am the last real Sioux left." We don't have men like him anymore. My mother, Mary Gertrude, was like her husband, full-blood and traditional. Her life was sad. Of her 12 children, only myself and my sisters Diane and Christine are still alive. She lost so many of her children. But she was strong enough to carry on, to take on the burden. She was born in 1900. She married my father in June 1921. 60 years later, you could still see them walking hand in hand. My mother took good care of us in the old Indian way. She was a member of the Native American Church and one of the first to sing during meetings. Up to then, only the men did the singing. She sang well. On my mother's side, they don't use peyote, only the pipe. They are the left-hand bulls. They are related to many medicine men. They come from White River on the Rosebud Reservation, some 30 miles north of Crow Dog's paradise. When my mother married Dad, people told her, "You are going to carry a heavy load. You're going to lead a hard life because the Crow Dogs live by themselves in the old way out on the prairie. When you marry Henry, you'll carry a heavy burden." She didn't mind. She had a broad back. She stood up for us and protected us always. My mother tells it like this. Leonard had an older brother, whom he never got to know. We named him Earl Edward. In 1934, he was about 2 years old. We were living at St. Francis at the time, near the church. Henry was working for the WPA, putting out cakes for cattle and picking beets, what the whites called Indian work. John Black Tomahawk came over to visit us. He was singing powwow songs, and Henry did the drumming. We were having a good time. Somebody heard it and thought we were having a peyote meeting. So he went and told the priest in St. Francis. The priest ran things there. They said, "Crow Dog is a heathen. He contaminates the flock, leading them to damnation." They sent the tribal police to arrest Crow Dog. They told Henry, "The missionaries don't want your kind here. You have 2 hours to get out of town, 2 hours or else." Henry ran over to Uncle Dick Foolbull. He asked, "What shall I do? My little boy is sick with a cough." Foolbull told him, "What can you do? They have the police. I have the power. You have your own allotment near the river. They can't chase you from there. Go there and pray." So Henry packed up. He took down the tent that was our home and fixed up the wagon, hitched up his team. He loaded up everything we owned and put us all in the wagon. There was a blizzard. You couldn't see your hand before your eyes. It was so cold. So Henry drove the team all the way to our allotment, with the snow and icy wind in his face. It was dark and you couldn't see. The horses were all iced over. There was hardly any road. It was slow going, and somewhere between St. Francis and our land, our little boy died. Of the cold, of the wind. His name was Earl Edward. Weeping, we made camp across the river from where the house is now. There was no house then. There was nothing. Henry and his friend Ed Redfeather went to the BIA office and got a coffin and all the things needed for the funeral. It was such a little coffin. Henry did not know where to bury our son. At St. Francis, they wouldn't have him, because their cemetery was for the good Christians only. Ed Redfeather told my father, "You have been to the Native American church, and you are welcome to return. You have a seat there. You can bring your son to be buried in our cemetery. They made our son a member of the Native American Church and buried him that way. I was so sad. I went to a meeting and took peyote for the first time. And in my vision, I saw the spirit with my dead children and was encouraged, even though I couldn't stop crying. Grandfather Peyote comforted me and Henry through his spiritual power. 1 year later, on the memorial of our little son's death, Henry and I were baptized in the Native American Church. Whoever was Catholic in our family then left the church. They said it was the priest who killed our little child. My mother died in 1987 of cancer. As long as her husband was alive, she remained strong. But when my father died, she lost heart. She lost the will to live. I wept for a long time. We miss her. How far can people remember their childhood? How far back can you remember it? Can you remember being born, being in your mother's womb? Can you recall a dream that you were in another world? Can you understand it? I remember it. I could not see, but in the eye of the mind, the eye of the heart, I can see it. During a ceremony, or when taking sacred medicine, I re-experience it. I can recall it. When I was born, I experienced earth joy, universe joy, happiness of the world. I could feel air filling my lungs on August 18th, 1942. I was born spiritually, with the gourd. The medicine man Hornchips was shaking it. For a day and a night, I could not see, but I heard people talking, heard a drum and a gourd, heard a song. And when I was so little, I remember the joy that I could crawl. I remember the places that I wanted to reach and couldn't reach. And the first thing I held in my hand was a ball, tapa they call it, and a round stone. During the Yuwipi ceremony, in the darkness when the spirits come, I remember this. As I grew up, they saw that I was different. Donka Sheila picked me from among the other boys to become a Pejuta Wichasha, a spiritual man. When I was about 5 years old, I was walking with some other boys, and I saw that my shadow was not like theirs. It was the shadow of a grown man. That was one of the first visions I had. I was a dreamer, and when it was time for me to go to school, my father would not let me, because going to a white man's school and learning the white man's way would spoil me for becoming a medicine man. And when the truant officers came to get me, my father chased them off with his shotgun. When I was 7 years old, my father purified me in the sweat lodge. 4 medicine men helped to initiate me. My father made an altar. The spiritual power was in it. It entered all of us. My father taught me the right prayers and songs. We all went into the sweat lodge. Inikagapi, Wokeya. We went in together. Within the circle, inside the sweat lodge, that's where they gave me the power. The Inyan, the Donka, that's a sacred stone we use. The Yuwipi Wa Sikung, the oldest god. One of the people who taught me from the earliest days was Goodlance. He was one of the few who still at that time wore their hair in long braids. He was a famous spiritual man among my people. He taught me the sacred ways, the prayers. My older sister, Christine, told me that I was not like other babies. It seemed to her that I knew more than a baby should know, that I grew up right away. I was 13 years old when I became what the whites call a medicine man, a Wichasha Wakan. It is not often that boys start out that young, but it happens. There are others besides me who were kept out of school, as I was, and who became spiritual people when still very young, especially those who perform the Yuwipi, the tying up ceremony, which I do. At 13, I went to the sweat lodge, the Initipi, and had my first grown-up sweat. For 4 times a day, for 4 days I did it. I came out very light-headed and told my mother, "Mom, somebody spoke to me. They talked to me. They told me to prepare a place to communicate with them." So my mother said, "Son, that's sacred. You're going where a long time ago your grandfather was. You are going into manhood now. You've got to do what your voices tell you." At about that time, I also went on my first Hambleseya, my first vision quest. I stayed on our vision hill for 4 days and nights. I neither ate nor drank. A big shadow again stood behind me. On the 3rd day he spoke to me. "I am the life of the generation, and I am the tree. I am the medicine. I am the things you experience. I will always speak to you. I will give you an altar. When you put up this altar, you must remember me. You must use the pipe and the 4 winds of the earth. From now on, you will be an interpreter for your people. Open your heart to them. Your grandfather is speaking to you now. I will be in you, and my spiritual words will grow inside you." That is the message. From the age of 12 to 18, that spirit power continued. A voice kept on saying, "My name is Sitting Rock. This is your Indian altar I am giving you. You will speak to each other through the ego, and you will speak to the ego. Now you have come far enough to handle the 2 center feathers. I am flying ego. I will interpret for you." At the age of 24, I went on another vision quest, and again a spirit man spoke to me. "I am Stand on the Earth Man. I have been chosen to teach you medicine, to give you herb power. That's why I am here." At the age of 29, I went crying for a dream once more, and again the spirit talked to me. "I am Lightning Man. I am speaking to you within the lightning power of the spirit. So that's the power I am giving to you. A new understanding." When I heard this, my hair stood up, and I heard a sound like knocking 2 flintstones together. When I was 32, I again went up the hill. That time the voice said, "I am Spirit Man. I am going to teach you understanding of human beings." From time to time, I still hear the voice. I had few friends because I didn't go to school, and we lived pretty far from the nearest settlement. The only friends I remember playing with as a child were 2 boys named Abel Goodlands and William Centers. They lived with us for about 1.5 years. I was about 6 years old then. They were orphans, and my father brought them over from Pine Ridge. I learned from them to carve little ponies and buffalo from old cow bones. We also took yellow wood, which is easy to carve, and all winter long made our own toys. I still have some of my Indian toys from those days. It was not until I was 10 years old that I got my first store-bought toy, a little car. Later on, Dad bought me some real marbles. That was a big event for me. Later I made shooters, something like a slingshot out of old tire tubes. I never shot at birds or living things, just at targets. As I got older, I made my own bows and arrows. At age 10, I had my own horse. Its name was Nick, and I rode him all summer. The thing I liked best of all was swimming, and I was really good at it. Sometime between age 7 and 14, I learned to dance from a medicine man. The hoop dance, the gourd dance, the eagle dance, and the rope dance, what we call spin roping. These are not good time dances to have fun. They are sacred ceremonies like prayers. The hoop dance represents the sacred hoop, the hoop of the universe, the circle without end, the circle of all living things, people, animals, and plants. By the time I was 9 years old, I could dance with 5 hoops. I kept them whirling around my arms and legs, as well as around my waist, dancing very fast to the beat of my father's drum. I formed the hoops into shapes, into a butterfly or a bird. I could jump through the hoops easily because I was still small and thin. Soon, I had the confidence to dance with 7 hoops. My father took me to powwows and I won many prizes. But I never forgot that dancing was a prayer and that the hoop was an altar, that it had a face, as my father said it. As I got older, I added more and more hoops, around my ankles, between my ankles and knees, and around my chest. By the time I was 12 years old, I danced with 16 hoops at the same time. When I was 14, I went to a big powwow with my dad and mom. As I was fixing up my costume, I saw a big cloud come up over me, and out of it I had a vision and heard a voice like a bird's, but I could not understand it. It told me, "Hochschild, boy, this is the moment, the year, the place where you will get a new understanding and a new power." I told my father about it and he said, "The hoops were your preparation, a way to get ready. From now on, you will learn to be a healer and learn how to help your people." That day, I danced as I had never danced before, with 21 hoops. People told me that it was the best dance they had ever seen. It was my last dance. After it, I hung up my hoops. They were for a boy, but now it was time for me to become a man. At age 16, I worked for 2 months on a farm in Nebraska for a Japanese man. Then I went back to South Dakota to work on a ranch for $5 a day. That was the only kind of work for an Indian then. After that, I did farm and ranch work for about 3 years. I did a lot of planting. And when there was no more farm work, I got a job at a body shop. My dad said to me, "You're about ready to get married and have children." I thought so too. Among the Lakota, we get to be fathers and mothers early in life. I took on a new name, Defends His Medicine, which represented our sacred plant, peyote. Sage and peyote are our 2 great sacred medicines. The Native American church, the Peyote Church, has always been under attack by the white man. It needs defending. That's why I took that name. So I stopped doing farm and ranch work, which kept me from being what had been shown to me in my vision. I became a spiritual man. A spirit had picked me to be a medicine man. Grandfather Peyote had chosen me to be a road chief of the Native American Church. Before I could even begin along that path, I had to go down into the pit and be buried in it, and come to life again through the power of Donkashila. And I had to have a vision to point the way. I had to go up the hill, crying for a dream, as they call it. But even before that, I had to be purified. To be purified, you have to go into the sweat lodge. My father called on good Lance, who had the power and the knowledge to help purify me. He also asked another relative, who was a spiritual man, Frank Arrowsight, to help. They instructed me, before you do anything of great importance in your life, you purify yourself in the Initi. Going on your first vision quest could be the greatest moment in your life, so preparing you for it must be done right. This sweat bath must be something special. It is sacred. In that little sweat lodge, the whole universe is contained. It is the Creator's home. In the center we make a hole, a perfect circle. We place the sacred rocks in this hole. Inside we make a carpet of sage to sit on. Sage is a holy herb and makes the spirits come in. The earth one takes out of the center pit. you make into a little mound outside the lodge. It represents Unchi, Grandmother Earth. And beyond that you make Peta, Owi Hankeshini, the fire without end. For wood my father used dry branches from the trees. They had to be laid in a certain way. First, 4 sticks running west and east, and 7 sticks running north and south. As my father laid the sticks down, he said a prayer. The door of the sweat lodge always faces west. Only at the home of a heyoka, a thunder dreamer, or contrary, does it face east, because a heyoka has to do everything different from anybody else. My father sat on one side of the entrance, Good Lance at the other. My cousin brought in the heated rocks, one by one, on a 4th stick. He placed the first 7 rocks, which represented the 4 sacred directions, the center of the universe, the sky above, and the earth below. They also represent the Wakichikapi. If you have loved ones who died, you remember them by this. My father sprinkled sage and cedar over the rocks. As it burned, it made a whispering sound, like a spirit voice. Then more rocks were placed in the pit. Finally, my cousin passed a pail of water into the lodge and lowered the entrance flap over the door. Inside, we were huddling in total darkness. All I could see was a red glow from the heated stones. I could feel their warmth. Now I knew that I was truly in Grandmother's womb. In the darkness of the womb, the darkness of the soul. In the warmth and moisture, I felt that this was myself before being born. The scent of burning sweetgrass and sage was around us like a blanket. I tried to catch the smoke with my hands and rub it all over me. My father prayed, he sang the songs. Then he poured cold water over the red-hot rocks. All at once, the initi was filled with white steam. It curled around us and enfolded us. It was very hot, so hot that I thought the steam would burn me up. My lungs seemed to be on fire, but I knew that this was a blessing, that it was the breath of the Creator purifying me. And out of the hot whiteness, I heard my father's voice. Immersed in this cloud, you will be cleansed. You will be prepared. More rocks were brought in. Then the flap was lowered over the entrance. More water was poured over the rocks, and again Grandfather's breath enfolded us. This was a 4-door sweat, meaning that the flap was opened and closed 4 times, and each time everything was repeated. After the 4th door, we were given cold spring water to drink, and my father said, "The moment we drink the sacred water of life, we receive its blessings." The moon brought all the waters together, from a tiny drop to a lake to a river. Let your mind flow like the water. We finished by smoking the pipe. It united us as if we had been one body. The pipe bowl of red stone coming from the sacred quarry, the only place in the world where you can find it. That is the flesh and blood of the Indian. The smoke coming from the pipe is the Creator's breath. Then it was over. I had been made ready for the vision quest. I had been reborn. Arrowsight asked me if I was prepared to fast for 4 days and nights. I nodded. Then he put me up there. There is a stream running through our land with a tree trunk across it. So we crossed on that and walked up to the hilltop. There is a flat place up there where in 1974 we brought the ghost dance back. There's cedar and pine at this place. Eagles circle over it. You hear the coyotes yapping, singing to the moon. It is beautiful and lonely up there. All you hear are the sounds of nature, animal talk, the wind blowing through the trees. In the center of all this is our family's vision pit. It is formed like a letter L, pointing the wrong way. First you go down, and then crawl across until you come to the dead end. That is the spot where we sit and cry for a dream. Frank Arrowsight made me walk 4 times around the vision pit. He made me put up 4 sacred direction flags, red material first, then the yellow, then the white, and then the black. So we put up these colors at 4 points around the vision pit. And then we put up a center pole with an eagle tail feather tied to the top and a deer tail farther down. Then I connected the 4-direction flag sticks with 400 chanli, tobacco tie offerings. Finally, we made an altar out of gopher dust, an iktomi, or Spider-Man altar. After that, Arrowsight took wachanga, sweetgrass, and smoked up all the flags and sacred things and made everything holy. Go around clockwise inside the grounds 4 times, he told me. Think only good thoughts. From your vision quest, bring something good back. Something good for yourself. Something good for your people. I was afraid. I did not know what was going to happen. I might be rejected. I might not be given a vision. I would be up there alone for 4 days and nights, without food, without water. It would not be easy. The first night, sometimes I sat close to the pit entrance, my head above ground. All I could see at first was a red circle, that's all. Then I crawled back into the hole, all the way, and I heard somebody walking on the left side, a rustling like a scattering of kindling. I heard birds. I heard an owl, whooping 4 times. That is what I heard and saw the first night. During the day, I stayed in the pit. I lost all sense of time, of feeling. I was like dead. I wanted water, but tried not to think of it. It was a different world, in a different dimension. As the second night started, I looked out. Wiyatki, the Big Dipper, was halfway up. The evening star went down. It clouded over. It was pitch dark, darker than dark. I prayed hard, and a white, shiny, fast ball came from the north. As it was coming toward me, I gripped my pipe. A voice was coming out of it.
Power is going into your body. It is coming. It does not speak, but you will know. The Iktomi power is given to you.
Then it hit me like a blow, like being struck by lightning. I crawled back into the pit as far as I could. I heard people talking, but could not see them. Then I saw teepees, horses, deer, buffalo. I was in another time. I heard children playing and laughing. All during the next day, I was half awake and half asleep. I didn't know anymore what was real and what was not. I was really hungry. I wanted water. But then I saw a woodpecker on top of one of the pine trees. Did I really see it? Or was I dreaming? I heard him hammering against a tree. Then I heard someone say,
"You are standing on Wakan Makoche, on sacred ground. Be happy. You are suffering now, but you are being given a power that will help you later in life."
So toward evening on my 3rd night, I crawled out just a little. The morning star was shining on me. I wasn't myself. I was facing toward the east. I felt spiritually as I had never felt before. And a man appeared to me, a soldier. It was Reuben Redfeather, who had been killed in action during World War II. He had been dead so long, but here he was. I think he wanted to help me in some way. The next morning and afternoon, I stayed in the pit. I no longer felt hunger or thirst. In the middle of the day, I saw Gopher's face. It came out of the altar. When it looked at me, I felt that a strange power had entered me. The gopher was swinging its tail and sprinkled me with sacred gopher dust. It rained down on me. I turned toward the south and prayed. The sun was halfway out when I was given another vision. Right behind me, I heard a voice from a spirit, from a hairy spider. An eagle was flying over me. A real eagle, not a dream eagle. I had my eagle bone whistle. I blew it 4 times in the 4 directions. Then a black cloud formed over me, and water sprinkled down on my head. And the voice said,
"The spirit will take care of you. Donkashila blesses you with the water."
That was all I heard on the fourth day. Standing there with the pipe, it seemed like forever until Arrow Sight came to bring me down. The sweat lodge was ready. I was hungry and thirsty. Arrow Sight said, "Before you talk, before you sweat, there is a young boy to feed you." They gave me water and corn, and that young boy, George Fourhorns, gave me 4 spoonfuls of everything they had prepared for me. Inside the sweat lodge, I told them what I had seen and heard. I left nothing out. I added nothing. Arrow Sight, Goodlands, my father, they all interpreted it for me. "It is all good," they said. "It made you a medicine man. But that's only one vision quest. You must go on 3 more before you can be the 4 different kinds of spiritual man combined in one person. But you have enough power not to take it from here. You are a medicine man. From now on, you have to travel grandfather's road. There is no looking back." I am a member of the Native American Church, the Peyote Church. Some people criticize me for that. They say that the sun dance is a Lakota belief, but peyote comes from another tribe. I shouldn't mix the two up, but I was born into the peyote way. I like it because it unites our people. Whatever religion, whatever ceremonies a tribe has, peyote makes them as one. I see nothing wrong with holding on to my old Lakota beliefs, while at the same time, I also practice the peyote way, together with my brothers and sisters from all tribes. When we sit in a meeting with people from other Indian nations, we might not speak their language, but spiritually we understand one another. In our songs, our languages become one. Anything is good that brings our people together in a spiritual way. From the Yukon to the Rio Grande, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, peyote power is the knowledge of God through peyote. It is our Indian medicine, our holy herb, our sacrament. It is not a chemical drug, but a natural plant. It elevates my mind into another world, into a higher dimension. With the peyote, I went to a lot of good places and met a lot of good people. Grandfather Peyote has no mouth, but he talks to me. He has no eyes, but he looks at me. He has no ears, but he listens. He is a song brought by the wind. The peyote way is thousands of years old. It is as old as the earth. The word peyote, my elders told me, comes from the Aztec peyotle, meaning caterpillar, because the peyote cactus is fuzzy, like a caterpillar's back. In Lakota, we call it unchila, or simply medicine. When the Spaniards came to Mexico, peyote was already there. The priest called it, which keeps the Indians from salvation. They burned alive all Indians they found using this sacred medicine. In the United States, the missionaries called peyote a barrier to civilization and put in jail those who prayed with it. Peyote doesn't grow in this country, except for a small area in southern Texas. We have to go into Mexico to harvest it. The Huichlo, Yaqui, and Tarahumara have always had it, but not the tribes north of the Rio Grande. About 150 years ago, the Comanches had a chief called Quanah Parker. In his youth, he had been a great warrior. He traveled down into Mexico, and there a bull gored him. He was about to die, but cured him with peyote. He took the medicine back. He also had the ritual as the woman had taught him. It was different from the Huichol and the Yaqui way. Though they all used the same sacrament, Quanah Parker founded the Native American Church. It was part Indian religion and part Christianity. His ritual became known as the crossfire ceremony because a Bible was used in it and prayers to Janet husked cigarettes in their meetings. Later, non-Christian Indians founded the Moonfire. They don't use the Bible and have the pipe instead of the corn husk cigarettes. But we all get along with one another. We all pray with the same medicine. From the Comanches, peyote spread to the other tribes farther north. My grandfather, John Crow Dog, first took peyote in Macy, Nebraska, at a powwow in 1921. He found a water drum and it led him to where some Winnebagos had a meeting. He joined them and took the sacrament and came to know the medicine. But he didn't join the church. He told them, "You eat peyote. That's good. I respect it. But I am a loner. I do things my own way. When I die, just plant me someplace. I don't need a cemetery. I stay by myself, far from other folks. I ain't a membership man." A Native American church ritual is beautiful. It is as tightly run as a Catholic Mass. All the things we use in the meeting, the drum, the staff, the gourd, the fan, must be handled in the right way. Whether it takes place in a house or teepee, the setup is always the same. There are differences between a half moon and a crossfire meeting, and between a Lakota and a Navajo one. But in the main parts, they are all alike. At the west, in the back, opposite the door of the teepee, sits the roadman or road chief. We call him that because he leads us on the road of life. He has a shawl around his shoulders that is half red and half blue. To his right sits the drummer, and to his left the cedar man, who uses cedar as incense during the meeting. At the east by the door sits the fireman, who tends and shapes the fire and also acts as doorkeeper. Close to him is the water carrier, always a woman. Among the Lakota, she is either the wife or daughter of the road chief. The road chief has with him the holy things: the staff, the gourd, the feather fan, the eagle bone whistle, and a bundle of sage. In front of him is an altar cloth. Some members bring their own staffs, gourds, and fans in a decorated wooden box. If it is a crossfire meeting, there will be a Bible. If I run a meeting, there will be a rack in front of me, made of 2 upright forked sticks with a cross piece. This is for the sacred pipe to rest on. In some places, they smoke corn husk cigarettes instead of the pipe. In front of the pipe rest is the half-moon altar. It is made of sand and shaped like a crescent, a half-moon. From one tip to the other, we make a groove that represents the road of life. The top of the altar is flat. On its center, we place the chief peyote, the grandfather peyote. Farther down from the roadman are the ashes, also shaped into a half-moon. Then there is the fireplace itself, with its glowing coals and the firepower. And then down the line, in a row, is the sacred food, the pail of water, the corn, the meat, which could be wasna or pemmican, and then the choke cherries or other fruit. The water represents the water of life. There can be no life without it. The spirit dwells in the water. The corn is the food of the Indian who created this corn, who bred it from a small kind of grass thousands of years ago. The meat, or wasna, represents our brother, the buffalo, who gives of his flesh so that the people may live. The choke cherries stand for the generations. We put a branch of choke cherries on the sacred tree during the Sundance. Outside the teepee, on the right side of the door, is a stack of wood to keep the fire going. During a meeting, the cedar man has a rawhide bag of dry cedar. At certain times, he sprinkles cedar over the glowing embers. This is our incense. It is pleasing to the spirits. It connects us to all the plants in the universe. We inhale the incense, smoke ourselves up, and rub that smoke on our bodies. The cedar is the blood vein of the generations. During a peyote meeting, one among us has to go to another world and come back. The cedar stands for everlasting life. All other trees change their colors and lose their leaves in fall. But the cedar stays green. We smoke up not only the people, but also all the instruments we use in our ritual. We cedar them. Besides cedar, we use sage for incense and sometimes sweetgrass. The fire in the center of the teepee is a bed of glowing coals. It is easy to have it in a teepee because there is an earth floor. In a house, it is not so easy. You can build it on a tray filled with earth, or on a not too heavy U-shaped slab of concrete. At midnight, the fire chief shapes the coals into a heart. because you should believe in this sacred medicine with all your heart, soul, and mind. That heart is alive. It pulsates. Then at about 4 a.m., you form the coals into a morning star. Because the Anpetu Wichapi is a sacred spirit in ancient Lakota belief. In a crossfire meeting, they have this design because in the Bible Christ says, "I am the bright morning star." If a person wants to convert to the peyote religion, this is the right moment, the moment of light, of enlightenment. Then at daybreak, we put the coals into the shape of a cross. That represents the sacred 4 directions of the Indian religion. In a crossfire ritual, it is, of course, Christ's cross of the crucifixion. Peyote is our spiritual power. Peyote makes us relate to Grandfather, the Creator. When you partake of the medicine, you know that you are in the power. You do not see things that are wrong. You see things that are right. It's like a mirror. You can't evade it. It scares you because you have to face yourself. When I take part in a meeting, I feel that I matter, that the universe couldn't go on without me. I was 6 or 7 years old when I first took peyote. The medicine affected me. I was thinking real old thoughts and singing a very old song. Every weekend, I'd go with my father with a team and wagon to a meeting. When I was 7, I really started to sing. A man called Chasing Hawk was hitting the drum, and I was catching on to those songs. I never forgot them. After learning to sing, I learned to feed the spirit, feed the fire outside. Then I learned to poke the fire inside a house or teepee, forming it up into a half-moon or cross. In time, I became a roadman, running meetings. Peyote is not a substance or chemical gimmick. It does not create addicts. It is a natural plant, a kind of cactus. You don't take it for recreation. You wouldn't want to because it doesn't taste good. It makes some people throw up during a meeting. That's quite all right. The doorkeeper will help them out with an empty tin can. At nightfall, the roadman opens the meeting with a prayer. The roadman places the chief peyote in the center of the altar. It is a big button of 16 segments that sometimes has been in the roadman's family for generations. At the time of midnight water, there is a pause. The roadman gives a spiritual talk. Everybody else also has a privilege to speak, to say something good, to ask help for his or her troubles. That is also a good time to get baptized, to be married in the Native American church way, or to be doctored. The peyote way is a from birth to death religion. In order to join the church, you must be baptized into it, and then you are a member. A newborn baby can also be baptized with the medicine. When I wanted to get married, I went to Uncle Leslie Fubo, and he told me that I and my future wife, Francine, should study the sacred medicine and come face to face with it, and then we could marry during a meeting. I already knew the peyote, and it knew me, but my bride came from a family in which they knew only the pipe. Uncle Leslie did not teach us. He told us, "Grandfather Peyote will be your teacher." So for a month we attended Native American church services together. Then we purified ourselves, and Uncle Leslie married us. Sometimes the peyote uses me as a tool to cure someone. Sometimes it does not. I do not know how this power works. I just accept it. Whatever the medicine wants to do, it does. Some white men call it witchcraft. We had missionaries forcing their way into our meetings, kicking and scattering our sacred things, telling us that peyote is from the devil. Now we have a charter, and the Native American Church is incorporated under the laws of South Dakota and other states. I have a certificate showing that I am a roadman. I have a permit from the state of Texas identifying me as a custodian of the church, allowing me to harvest the peyote legally anywhere I can find it. As I said before, peyote does not grow in North America. South of Laredo, Texas, it grows on a narrow strip on both sides of the Rio Grande, and at one point it goes up to the city of Miranda, some 30 miles inside Texas. But that is the northernmost place you can find it. I call the whole area our peyote gardens, because the Creator chose it for the spot where we could harvest our sacred medicine. The law treats the medicine like a drug or a doctor's prescription. It must meet certain standards. It has to be pure in the Food and Drug Administration's way. So now they have a machine to sanitize the peyote. It runs hot and cold water over the plants and shakes the peyote clean so that there is no sand in it, to make it fit for Mr. Indian to use. They grade it like eggs, big or small. We must harvest according to the rules. The medicine is pure as the Spirit made it, as you find it. But the government says it must be made sanitary, like aspirin or Alka-Seltzer. There are two kinds of peyote. The same type of plant. One has 12 white spots on top. This peyote can be made into a tea or a mush. The other has 10 spots and must be sun-dried. After you dry it, the button is the size of a silver dollar. When you dry it the right way, the juice, the power stays in there. But the machine shakes the juice out, and some of the power goes with it. Then the medicine is weakened. Going to harvest peyote is like a sacred pilgrimage. Before you start the harvesting, at sunrise, you must say a good strong prayer to the four directions of the universe, to the sky above, and to Mother Earth below. Whenever you find a grandfather peyote, you say a prayer. You never cut the whole plant. You don't cut clear to the root. You only cut off the top, the button, and the plant grows again. After 6 months, when you go there again, you will find a pink flower. And after another 6 months, there will be a fresh green peyote there. We do not go to meetings to get high. You partake of the medicine to understand the Creator and yourself. You do not expect to get a vision, and most of the time you don't. You have no craving for peyote as such. You use it as a means to come close to the Spirit and to each other, because it is a medicine that unifies. But visions and dreams are at the center of what we believe in. We are a dream people. You can have a vision during a vision quest, or in a sweat bath, or in a Yuipi ceremony, or just walking in nature. And you can experience a vision through the power of peyote. I see something every time I go to a meeting. During a crossfire ceremony, I saw a light shining on the sacred medicine. And I saw a man in the cloud when I was under the power. A man with long hair and a red and blue peyote blanket, holding up his hands, and he was singing a song. I was looking up and down. I saw the words. I can't read or write, but all of a sudden this voice went into me and let me catch that song. It was a big butterfly. He was wearing a costume with peyote buttons, and that butterfly's eyes were shining. And the butterfly turned into a blue jay and went straight up, and I heard a voice. Hesetuela. You learn. I took some buttons and learned that song. Under the spiritual power, you will see how far you are from the Great Spirit and the roots of Indian medicine, and how far you've been taken away from nature. But then peyote will make you feel that the Spirit is close to you, and it will bring you back to nature, to the black-tailed deer and the buffalo. Peyote is something on which you can stand. It is a great power. There are other powers in our beliefs, not bigger and not smaller than peyote. The power of grandfather's breath in the sweat lodge, the power of the sacred pipe, the power of the rock in a Yuipi ceremony, the power of the dream during a vision quest, the power coming from the Sundance tree, Peyote is one of these powers that cannot be explained. I am a roadman. I was picked inside my mother's womb. I was born with the shell, the caul, the birth veil. I know how I came to be. I am a roadman of the Native American Church. I am my father's son. On January 14th, 1890, my great-grandfather, Jerome Crow Dog, came out of the Badlands with his people to surrender. He and his band were the last of the ghost dancers, the last to dance the Wanagiwashipi. In March of 1973, I, Leonard Crow Dog, brought the ghost dance back, at the right place, at the right time. I started from where the first Crow Dog had stopped. I brought it back at Wounded Knee, during the 71-day siege, when I was the spiritual leader of AIM, the American Indian movement. My great-grandfather's spirit gave me a vision to do this. My vision told me to revive this ceremony at the place where Chief Bigfoot's ghost dancers, 300 men, women, and children, had been massacred by the army, shot to pieces by cannon. Old people, babies. I could feel their spirits telling me to do it. Everybody at Wounded Knee could feel the presence of the ghosts of those who had been killed. Their bodies lying in that ditch, right under our feet. So I rounded up as many people as I could get hold of. With the help of Wallace Black Elk, we were going to dance for the sake of the spirits, for our own sakes. I spoke to the people. Somebody taped it, so my words are not lost. Tomorrow, we are going to ghost dance. For 83 years it has never been danced. When they killed our people here so long ago, it was said that the nation's hoop was broken. We'll make that sacred hoop whole again, so we're going to dance. Whether it rains or snows, whether it's muddy or covered with snow, the spirit will come traveling. There'll be no rest, no intermission, no coffee break. During the day, we're not going to eat or drink water. We'll unite together as one tribe through the language of the Great Spirit. We are not going to divide. We're going to be brothers and sisters. Whether you're Mohawk or Cheyenne, we'll be as one. We will hold hands. If one of you gets into the power, if he's in a trance, if he falls down inside the ring, let him. If somebody goes into convulsions, let him. Don't get scared. The spirit will be the doctor. If anything happens like that, hold hands. Keep dancing. There will be no drum. The earth will be our drum. Our feet will do the drumming. There's a song I'm going to sing, my grandfather's song. The clouds will be dreams. They'll go into your minds. You will see visions. We will elevate ourselves from this world to another. From there we can see Donkashila. We're going to remember our brothers who were killed by the white man. And you will see your brothers, your relations who have died. You will see them. The ghost dance spirit will appear. The sacred pipe is going to be there. The fire is going to be there. The sage is going to be there. Indian tobacco is going to be there. It starts physically and goes into spirituality. And then you will get into the power. It's going to start here, at Wounded Knee, and it will continue. We are going to unite as brothers and sisters. We will ghost dance. Everybody has heard about the ghost dance, but nobody has ever seen it. It was something the United States government had forbidden. No ghost dance, no sun dance, no Indian religion. That hoop has not been broken. We will dance for the future generations. I don't have to instruct you. After you get into the circle, the Spirit will tell you. Give you the power to speak. We're all going to speak another language all of a sudden, because we dance in a sacred way. We're going to bring everybody together with this eagle bone whistle. I want to see a vision tomorrow. We'll all be blessed in the Indian way. This hoop has not been broken. This is a vision of 4 dimensions. Nobody can stop us. An old man should direct this dance. But there's no elder here who knows how to do this. So I guess it's up to me, because this dance has been in my family for 4 generations. This sacred stick will travel from tribe to tribe. We will eat sacred food. You will hear the buffalo. Hear their voices coming up through Mother Earth. Then the buffalo could come back. You'll know how the Indian has been born. There will be spiritual knowledge. Today, here at Wounded Knee, the white man is again all around us. With his armored cars and heavy machine guns. His planes and helicopters are circling above us. Like Bigfoot's people, we might be killed here. If we die, we'll be buried here on this sacred ground. That's where I want to be buried. First put me on a scaffold in a blanket, and then put me in the earth here. Whether we're going to die or not, we're going to dance. We began with the sweat bath. 1 sweat for the men and 1 for the women. We rubbed our bodies with sage and sweetgrass. We prepared the dance circle. We put the evergreen, the tree of life, in the middle. We put tobacco ties and cloth offerings on it. We used sacred red face paint. We used magpie feathers. Every dancer wore an eagle feather in his hair. We danced in a circle, holding hands from right to left, starting slowly, and then going faster and faster, sometimes with arms upraised. We danced in the ravine where so many of our women and children had been killed by the 7th Cavalry. It was cold. The grass was brown. There was a frost on it. In some places, there were snow patches. On and off it snowed. The earth trembled. I felt the ghosts dancing beneath the ground. And some of the dancers fell down in a trance, fell down like dead, receiving visions. So at Wounded Knee, with a cold wind blowing, we re-educated ourselves. We had about 30 dancers. Many were barefoot in the old ghost dance way, even though there was snow on the ground. Wounded Knee gave knowledge to the people. Wounded Knee is the spirit that knows the red man. It is an identity you can stand on. I felt good. I felt proud. I had brought something back to my people that had been lost for almost a century. At Wounded Knee, I brought the ghost dance back to the American Indian movement. A year later, in May of 1974, I brought it back to my own people. I put it on at the place where we Crow Dogs have gone on vision quest for generations. Where we have our vision pit. Nature has split the Crow Dog allotment land into 2 parts, a high and a low one. At the bottom, near the Little White River, my father had his house that burned down some 20 years ago. This is where we hold our sun dance every summer. To get to the high part, you have to cross a little stream. There is no bridge, just a large tree trunk to get over as best you can. And then there is a very steep footpath to the top of the hill. Up there is a large flat covered with grass, with pine and cedar trees all around it. This place is very beautiful and very sacred. Nobody ever goes there, but some animals for whom this is a shelter where they are safe. It is this spot I chose for my ghost dance. This time, I was happy to have my father there, and old Uncle Fool Bull to instruct me and the dancers, and to teach us some of the ancient ghost dance songs. The most sacred thing for us Lakota is the chanupa, the holy pipe. The pipe and the Indian go together. They cannot be separated. The pipe lifted up in prayer forms a link between man and Donkashila. It's a spiritual bridge to the Great Spirit. With the pipe, I can communicate with Donkashila, the grandfather spirit, whom we also call Wakantanka, the great sacredness. With the pipe, I let my mind fly through the air. The sacred pipe is a smoke signal to Donkashila. The pipe is not a thing. It is alive. You can feel its power as you hold it. power from Petsan Wen, the white buffalo woman, who brought this great gift to us. Within the pipe dwells the power of Wakantanka, male and female power. Man is the stem, woman is the bowl. When I speak of the pipe, I speak with an ancient knowledge that lies within me. I was born before my father. By this I mean that my spirit was born hundreds of years ago. What my ancestors left, whatever the white man has not destroyed, I pick up and continue on. A man without a country, that's Mr. Indian. But our spiritual country is still there, thanks to the pipe. Putting up fences is the white man's way. He invented the barbed wire of the heart. The pipe is a fence remover. Sitting in a circle, smoking it the right way, all barriers disappear. Walls crumble. The pipe is our Bible. The white man brought his book. You shall not kill. You shall not steal. You shall not covet. But he did all those things. He betrayed his book. We don't have a book. We have the pipe. The pipe is us. Inyan Shah, the red pipestone, is our flesh and blood. The stem is our spine, the bowl our head. The smoke rising from it is Donkashila's breath. There is an old story handed down from grandparent to grandchild, generation after generation. It is the story of a great flood that carried everything before it. The people fled to the top of high mountains, but even there the rising waters swept over them. Their flesh and blood turned to stone, the red pipestone. Only one young woman survived. An eagle carried her to the top of a tree, on the highest cliff above the water. The young woman had twins, a boy and a girl, the eagle's children. These twins are the ancestors of our Lakota nation. The sacred redstone occurs at only one spot in the whole world, at a quarry in western Minnesota. In the old days, this was a sacred ground. Not only to the Sioux, but to many other tribes who came there to get the red stone for their pipes. At that place, even bitter enemies became friends, digging the stone side by side. Among whites, the stone is known as Catlinite, after the painter George Catlin, the first white man to visit the quarry way back in 1837. The sacred stone forms a long band sandwiched between layers of other kinds of rock. I have been there many times to dig out the Inyan Shah. Pipes are kept in special bags called Shantujuha, heart bags, because the pipe stands at the heart of our existence. Usually fringed, the pipe bags are beautifully decorated with bead and quill work. When not being smoked, the bowl and stem are kept separate. They are just too powerful to be joined together for any length of time. Together with the pipe, a man may also keep a poker, ichasluka, for tamping down the tobacco in the bowl. It is often also beautifully decorated. Sometimes as a tamper, they use a wooden skewer, with which a friend has pierced himself during the Sundance. Chanshasha, the tobacco used for smoking the pipe, is also sacred. It is not like the stuff in a white man's cigarette that gives you lung cancer and makes you an addict. Something used only to make you feel good. It contains no nicotine. Chanshasha is made from the inner bark of a dogwood, or red osier dogwood, that grows along Little White River, right near our place. Some tribes use red willow bark, but we prefer the dogwood. Sometimes we mix it with sweet-smelling herbs, such as chanli ichaiye, snake root, which keeps poisonous snakes away. We also mix our tobacco with arrowroot. As the pipe goes around, every puff is a prayer. As you inhale the smoke, all humankind smokes with you. Your breath mingles with the breath of all other living beings. The spirit is in the pipe. Smoking in a circle, you hear voices coming out of nowhere. Spirits may appear and talk to you, and they speak every language in the world. There is a purpose and a reason for using the pipe this way, the way Donkashila wants it. The pipe is like a human being. It is not a thing. It is our flesh and blood. It was like in the days of the ghost dance. There was a whispering in the air, a faint drum beat, a hoofbeat. It became a roar carried by the four winds. A nation is coming. The eagle brought the message. What was coming called itself AIM, the American Indian Movement. White people call me a medicine man, a spiritual leader. They think that my job is just to pray and to perform ceremonies. But that's only part of it. A medicine man lives among his people. He has to experience life, all of it. He must be higher than an eagle and sometimes lower than a worm. He exists for the people, and he has to fight for them if necessary. He must even turn himself into a politician if a politician is what his people need. The American Indian Movement is something new, but it is also something very old. It was born when the white man killed the first Indian and stole some of his land. AIM was founded inside a Minnesota prison by young men who had been abused, mistreated, and starved in boarding schools, orphanages, and foster homes, who had been taken away from loving parents whom white bureaucrats called unfit because their homes had no electricity or indoor plumbing. When they came out of these foster homes and boarding schools, they were angry. And because they were angry, they got into trouble and wound up in a penitentiary. 4 of this kind of men were talking inside prison walls. Dennis Banks, Clyde Belcourt, George Mitchell, and Eddie Benton Banai. They were all Ojibways born on various Minnesota reservations. Out of these talks, an idea was born. After their release, they founded an Indian civil rights organization. During one of their first meetings in St. Paul, somebody proposed that they call themselves Concerned Indian Americans, but abbreviated that would have been CIA. Then one woman said, "You men always aim to do this or to do that. Why don't you call yourselves AIM, the American Indian Movement?" After that, nothing was ever the same again. AIM was an organization of Indians living in big city ghettos. Most of them no longer spoke their tribal languages. Many had never seen an Indian ceremony performed. They started out the right way, keeping Indians from drinking, protecting them from police brutality, founding an Indian Way school for Native kids, demonstrating against racism and injustice. But for over a year, we on the reservation didn't know about them. Even so, I was already involved in the struggle. I want to say up front that I am not against the white man as a person. There are many white people whom I like, even love. I am not against the white human being, but I am against his system under which I am forced to live. So from early on, I fought against it. I try to educate my people. I am like a magnet. I pull the people to me, pull them together. I look upon my white friends who have for so long supported me as brothers and sisters. I don't look at the color of their skin. Many young Wasichus have come to Crow Dog's Paradise, often staying for weeks or months. I feed them and give them shelter. There are many good, understanding white men and women. The only trouble is, there's not enough of them. In 1970, a man came to Crow Dog's place. His name was Dennis Banks. He was an Ojibwe from the Leech Lake Reservation in Minnesota and a co-founder of AIM. He knocked at our door. My dad opened it and invited him in. Dennis said, "I've come because you people have got something that we city Indians lost. We have an Indian organization that is doing fine, but it needs not only a political philosophy, but also a spiritual meaning in order to be complete. That is why I have come." My father asked him, "Have you ever gone on a vision quest?" Dennis said no. My father asked, "Are you a sun dancer?" Dennis said no. My father asked, "Have you ever purified yourself in a sweat lodge?" And again Dennis said no. My father told him, "Then I don't know why you have come." Dennis said, I live close to Pipestone. I can make redstone pipes. My father said, "Then we have something to talk about." My mother fried up some meat and brewed some coffee. They all had something to eat. Then my father and Dennis talked for a long time. After that, my dad took Dennis in back of our place where we have a sweat lodge. It was winter, and there was a lot of snow on the ground. My father had Dennis shovel away the snow inside and around the lodge. He made Dennis chop some wood. They made a fire and heated the rocks in it. The buffalo skull was already there. My dad brought some tarps and blankets to cover up the lodge. He had a sweat and purified him. It made Dennis into a new kind of man. My dad told him, "Come again. We have lots to talk about." Dennis left and came back with Clyde Belcourt, another of the AIM founders. They and Dad became good friends. Finally, I met Dennis Banks. He told me about AIM and what it stood for. This was what I had been waiting for. After listening to Dennis, I really believed that the American Indian movement could bring about a rebirth of our people. I believed it could unite all the Native Americans in the United States. Later, I got a telegram to go to Rapid City and meet all the AIM leaders. Dennis was there, and Russell Means, Lee Brightman, Clyde Belcourt. I talked to them for a very long time. I spoke to them as a spiritual man. They asked me what I thought about the Black Hills and the government offering us some chicken feed money in exchange for the sacred land they had stolen from us. I said that we'd never accept money for our land. Dennis agreed and said that AIM and all the other tribes would take a stand. Then I went to Denver to meet some more AIM leaders. Vern Belcourt, Clyde's brother, Eddie Benton, John Trudeau, and Stan Holder. Dennis Banks told me that AIM had enough political leaders, but they needed spiritual guidance. He asked me to be AIM's medicine man. I answered, "I will give myself to the movement." When the traditional Lakota and the city militants got together, that was the moment AIM took off. Suddenly, men wore their hair long or in braids. They threw away their neckties. Everybody started wearing bead or bone chokers. They began wearing ribbon shirts. They wore Levi jackets with AIM patches and buttons reading "Indian Power" or "Indian and Proud." They had eagle feathers tied to their hair or stuck in their hatbands. We became warriors again. In 1970, Dennis Banks, Russell Means, and Clyde Belcourt pledged to pierce themselves in the Sundance. In 1971 at Pine Ridge, they offered their pain to the people. The American Indian movement spread like wildfire. In 1960, the American Indian Youth Council was founded by Vine Deloria, a Lakota, and Clyde warrior Mel Thom, Shirley Witt, and Herb Blatchford. This was a forerunner of AIM and a big step for Native American rights. In 1964 began the War for Indian Fishing Rights at Frank's Landing in Washington State. The leaders there were Sid Miles and later Hank Adams, who both joined the struggle at Wounded Knee in 1973. They were holding fish-ins, and there was a lot of violence on the part of the state troopers. Things were happening all over. In 1967, Bob Burnett, a friend of mine and twice chairman of our tribe, took 21 Rosebud men and women to New York in order to break through the buckskin curtain and join Dr. Martin Luther King's Peace March. Bob was what the whites called a moderate Indian leader, but he broke a lot of ground for us. My dad, Chief Lame Deer, and I were part of this group. Henry and Lame Deer stood on the platform next to Dr. King. Later we all had dinner at Richard Erdo's place. Then we went to Harlem to meet up with some of the Black Power leaders. Lame Deer joked and told Stokely Carmichael, "Indian kills his enemy. White man skins his friend. What do you do?" Stokely laughed. "We eat them." This march was a breakthrough. Our tribe got on the map. In 1969, some 300 Native Americans calling themselves Indian of All Tribes took over Alcatraz Island. Their leader was Richard Oakes, a Mohawk, who was later murdered by a white racist. In 1970, On the 350th anniversary of the landing of the Pilgrims, a group of AIM members led by Russell Means boarded the Mayflower II and hoisted an AIM flag on her mast. They later buried Plymouth Rock under a truckload of sand. Russell told the press that Indians were an endangered species. Throughout these years, we staged rallies, confrontations, marches, and protests. Being AIM's spiritual leader caused problems for me. Before, I had been one of several medicine men in our Rosebud tribe. Now it seemed that I was the medicine man for every Indian in the country. That was hard, especially for my family. Crow Dog's Paradise became a sort of AIM settlement. People were camping out everywhere. Folks dropped in at all hours, day and night. Guests had to be fed. They slept anywhere they could find a place to plant their bodies. They slept in my dad's and mom's house, which Dad had built himself out of odds and ends, tree trunks, car windows, whatever. They slept in my family's house just a few yards away, a red-painted transitional house, the kind the tribe put up for us Rosebud people. The floors of both houses often were covered with sleeping figures. You had no place to put your feet. The transitional house was not solidly built. It seemed to fall apart with the wear and tear of so many visitors. Young white people, hippies, and flower children camped out on the Paradise, trying to find something they had lost, some spiritual belief, and they stayed, and stayed, and stayed. People came to the medicine man for help, for spiritual as well as material assistance I was expected to provide. As long as I was the medicine man, just for some Rosebud people, I could do it. Now it seemed the whole world was coming to me for advice, consolation, doctoring, money, food. So what was I supposed to do? I had to hustle. In between all my other tasks, I traveled, always with my whole family. I raised money by giving lectures on Native American culture, even though my English at that time was pretty bad. In the meantime, things had gotten bad in South Dakota. At the end of 1972 and the beginning of 1973, AIM had come in force to Rapid City to demonstrate, educate, and sensitize the white people there. AIM called South Dakota the most racist state in the Union, and Rapid City the most racist town in the state. In Rapid City, Indians were discriminated against in every way. They were made to feel unwelcome in stores, restaurants, and bars. They were called all kinds of names and beaten up. If they got any jobs at all, they were paid less than the whites. Conditions were worst at a place called Sioux Addition, 3 miles out of town. This was a kind of apartheid slum the city had set aside to get rid of its Indian population. Sioux Addition was a jumble of more than 100 shacks and rusting trailers without running water or sanitation. The fire department would never come in there. It was a place of neglect and despair. At that time, Ron Petit was executive director of the Sioux Indian Emergency Rehabilitation Center in Rapid City. He was very worried about Indian veterans who were being mistreated and could not get the services they were entitled to by law. Instead of an open door, they got the back of the hand. Ron Petit called on AIM for help. So many reservation people and about 200 AIM members from all over came to Rapid City to clean up the situation. Dennis Banks, Russell Means, and the Belcourts were in charge of the operation. I was there too as a protest spiritual leader. Most of us stayed at the Mother Butler Center, a Catholic church hall which became our headquarters. There were 3,000 Indians living in and around Rapid City, and we were going to deal with their grievances. Dennis Banks declared a freeze on the whole city. He said, "We will shut the whole business district down on account of the discrimination and mistreatment of Indian veterans. We'll literally chain up the doors of the big business enterprises, federal agencies, and local community service centers." We boycotted Northwestern Bell Telephone, Black Hills Power and Light, Kmart, Piggly Wiggly, Dunkin' Donuts, Super Duper, and the law enforcement agencies. We put up posters. "Welcome to the most racist state in the USA and see South Dakota last." Dennis tried to train the people in nonviolent tactics, giving orders by blowing a whistle. But he gave it up soon because young AIM kids weren't good at being drilled. I was resting at Mother Butler's when someone came to warn me that the town was about to blow up. A Pine Ridge man had brought the news that still another Lakota, Wesley Bad Heart Bull, had been killed by a white man, and that the murderer had been charged with only involuntary manslaughter, which meant that he would go free. Without waiting for any leaders to tell them what to do, all the young Ames went down into the streets. The real trouble started when an Indian went into a bar crammed with white customers. One of them threw a glass of whiskey in the Indian's face. These saloons had always been places of humiliation for us. So now the young Indians did a thorough job on them. Whites and Indians fought each other with fists, bottles, ashtrays, bung starters, whatever they could get their hands on. The police went amok and arrested every Indian in sight. The mayor ordered a bus and a fire truck to be used as extra paddy wagons. Hundreds were arrested and wound up in the Pennington County Jail. I myself knew the jail from the inside. Being a South Dakota Sioux, you couldn't avoid it. Not a single white man was arrested. I led some 150 Indians to protest in front of the jail. We were faced by a line of police in full riot gear. We had a drum and were singing and chanting. Then we went to the courthouse and did the same. The situation was dangerous. Anything could have happened. Bloodshed was averted when Dennis Banks created a demilitarized zone between Wasechus and Native Americans. But Rapid City was just a warm-up for what took place immediately after the confrontation at Custer. It started with a murder on January 20th, 1973, at Bill's Bar, in a place called Buffalo Gap at the edge of the Black Hills. There was a big crowd at Bill's Bar, mostly white cowboys and ranchers. In the bar was also a young Lakota named Wesley Bad Heart Bull. The next morning, Wesley was lying in the street near the bar with a knife stuck in his chest. He died on the way to the hospital. The killer, a man named Schmitz, was arrested on a charge of second-degree manslaughter, the smallest charge they could use. He was taken to Custer and there released on bail. People from Rosebud and Pine Ridge went to Custer to see that justice be done. They asked AIM for help. It was a coincidence that so many AIM people were already in Rapid City for the protests. We hated that city already for its name, Custer. It is deep inside our sacred Black Hills, stolen by the government in violation of the Fort Laramie Treaty, after gold had been discovered in the hills. On February 6th, we formed a caravan of more than 30 cars out of Rapid City to drive the 45 miles to Custer and join the Indians already there. It was snowing and it was cold, 6 or 7 degrees above zero. We got there in the early afternoon. At the start, things were peaceful. We had made up a delegation of 5 to speak to the DA, Hobart Gates, and the Sheriff Ernest Pepin. Dennis Banks, Russell Means, and I were part of the delegation. It was going to be the same old story. A white man who had killed an Indian would go free. As word of this got out, there was a big howl of protest from the crowd at the steps of the courthouse. Some 25 Indians forced the door and got in. During the scuffle that followed, the sheriff ordered the courthouse cleared. 24 highway patrolmen had been hiding on the second floor. They now came down on us, swinging their long clubs. They were armed with shotguns, rifles, and nightsticks. They drove us out of the building with their clubs and tear gas. I busted a window on the first floor and jumped out. Dennis jumped after me. Russell was down on the ground, dazed, clubbed, bleeding, and handcuffed. I saw a middle-aged Indian lying beaten unconscious on the ground, like a heap of rags. The billboard, "Welcome to Custer, the town with a gunsmoke flavor," went up in flames. Stores along Main Street were torched and wrecked. I saw brothers and sisters spread-eagled against the wall, being frisked and handcuffed. The sheriff was saying to Russell, who was still handcuffed, "We were waiting for you AIM sons of bitches. We knew you were coming. You were looking for trouble and you got it." Russell told him, "If we had wanted to have a war here, we wouldn't have brought our women and children." 41 Indian men and women were arrested and charged. Among them, Sarah Bad Heart Bull. She was later tried for rioting and attempted arson and served 5 months in the penitentiary. Her son's murderer did not serve a single hour. On February 27th, 1973, started the biggest event in Indian history during this century, the 71-day occupation of Chanke Opi, Wounded Knee. This place has great meaning for me, because my great-grandfather, Jerome, the first Crow Dog, had been a ghost dancer. At the time they massacred our people there, in the ravines along Wounded Knee Creek, his own band was dancing deep inside the Badlands, not so far away. He and his people also had been surrounded by the soldiers, and would have been killed if Crow Dog had not had an inspiration, given to him in a vision, through which he could save his dancers. The second Wounded Knee happened just 3 weeks after Custer. At Pine Ridge, the goons were running wild. Things had gotten to where the people just could not endure it any longer. Nobody was safe, not even women and children. The goon squad beat people up every day. They shot into windows. Houses were firebombed. There were murders that never got investigated. So the elders, the traditionals, the AIM followers, and all the medicine men called on AIM for help. And AIM answered the call. As soon as Wounded Knee was mentioned, I got very serious. Everybody did. Wounded Knee was our most sacred site. To be standing up there would be the greatest thing we could do. Why hadn't the leaders thought of this? The occupation of Wounded Knee wasn't planned. It came about naturally, as the Spirit inspired. So we took off to meet our destiny. Standing on that hill where so many of our people were buried in a common grave. Standing there in that cold darkness under the stars. Tears ran down my face. I can't describe what I felt. I heard the voices of the long-dead ghost dancers crying out to us. Their ghosts were all around. They had been waiting for us for a long time. They had known that we were coming. They were standing with us on that hill. It was the night of all nights. At first we tried to take stock of the situation. People were milling around the white-painted Sacred Heart Church, the museum, and Gildersleeve's trading post with its garish sign. Wounded Knee Massacre, National Historic Site, Trading Post, Authentic Indian Arts and Crafts. See the mass burial grave, visit the museum. Curios for sale, gas, oil, all credit cards accepted. The trading post was the biggest building in downtown Wounded Knee. It was a combination general store, cafeteria, food market, curio shop, and pawn shop. It had a gas station with pumps and neon lights in front. It had started as a little peddler store, and then had been added on to until it was now $1 million emporium. The one place on earth most sacred to us had been turned into a tourist trap. So now the people were taking it over, liberating cigarettes and food. A few people who were cold took some clothes. I told people not to take anything, but they did it anyhow. They were saying Gildersleeve has robbed us and overcharged us for years and years. We are only getting a little back of what is owed to us. We are the ones who made them rich. There were about 300 of us occupiers. We had people from many tribes: Navajos, Cheyennes, Crows, Arapahoes, and Shoshones. We had Otos, Potawatomis, Sac and Fox, Ojibways, Kiowas, and Hopis. There were North Dakota and Northwest Coast Indians, too. Also Blackfeet, and members of New York State tribes, Onondagas and Mohawks. One single beautiful Shinnecock lady from Long Island. We were joined by some Apaches and Cherokees. Altogether, we had close to 50 tribes at the knee. The leaders stood in front of the church speaking to the people. Russell Means said, "I am ready to die right here. I'm not going to die in some barroom brawl. I'm not going to die in some car wreck on the side of a lonely road on the res because I've been drinking to escape the oppression of white society. That's not the way I'm going to die. I am going to die for my treaty rights, right here if necessary. Dennis Banks spoke. This is not an AIM action. It's an all-Indian action. They can't do anything worse than kill us. The feds will be coming soon. Be prepared to defend this position with your life. What is at stake here at Wounded Knee is not just the lives of a few hundred Indian people, but our whole Indian way of life. Our movement began when the Great Spirit organized the creation. The sacred altar is this hemisphere, this earth we're standing on, this Wounded Knee. They massacred us here, our women and children. We want to massacre only the white man's attitudes. I am not afraid to die. If I die here, I will go where Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull are. The first thing we did was establish a defense perimeter. At the start, only around the top of the hill, around the church and the cemetery. We dug a trench and put up a low wall made of cinder blocks, sandbags, and sacks of masonry cement. Later, we widened the perimeter to include all of downtown. Downtown was where we lived and cooked and ate and had our meetings. It was made up of about 10 buildings. The trading post, which we turned into our community center. The post office. The clinic. A low wooden house across from the trading post, which had running water and heat. The museum, which became the security center. And another wooden building where some people slept. The Sacred Heart Church we used to house people. We established a kitchen in the basement. Toward the east were 2 small churches and the minister's house. We put some 70 people in there. Wounded Knee was the hub of 4 roads coming from Porcupine, Manderson, Pine Ridge, and Denby. The whole area around the knee is rolling prairie with grass-covered hills. Way in the distance are patches of pine. It was decided that I was not only to give spiritual guidance, but that I would also doctor the wounded and handle all gunshot cases. Wallace Black Elk, a Rosebud Sioux like myself, was the other medicine man. He had come with his wife, Grace. We both performed ceremonies. Stan Holder was named head of security, and Bod Free would be our engineer in charge of electricity, the gas pumps, and all other equipment. Lorelei Decora was put in charge of the hospital. We lost little time getting organized. We counted our weapons. We had 26 firearms, mostly hunting rifles, 22s and 30-30s, 12 and 16 gauge shotguns. Some had been liberated from the trading post. We also had maybe a dozen handguns. We had no high-powered rifles. There was only one automatic weapon, an AK-47. It belonged to Bobby Uncle, a brother from Oklahoma and Vietnam vet, who had brought it home as a war souvenir. Only 1 in 10 of us was armed. One young kid had brought a modern hunting bow and arrows. One guy had an old Italian World War I rifle, but could find no bullets to fit it. Ammo was a big problem. We piled up what little we had on the altar of the church, and Dennis or Stan Holder rationed it out. That was all we had to challenge the greatest power on Earth. The feds, as we found out during the long siege, had armored personnel carriers, heavily armored tracked vehicles like tanks. They had M60, 50, and 30 caliber machine guns, aerial illumination flares, tripwire flares, M16 automatic rifles, searchlights, fancy starlight and infrared night scopes, M79 grenade launchers, and rockets to launch CS tear gas. They had 3 helicopters to watch us, and several times we were buzzed by low-flying Phantom jets. They had mobile field communication systems. We had all this coming down on us. Some thought we would occupy the knee for only a few days. I thought it could last for a month. As it turned out, the siege lasted for 71 days. The feds, of course, tried to stop supplies from coming in. Dennis announced that we would eat horses, dogs, cats, rats, and even dirt before we'd let the government starve us out. Inside the church was an altar with a plaster-cast Jesus, Virgin Mary, and St. Joseph. Vases with flowers stood at each end. Some of our people slept in that church, so there was drumming, singing, and dancing, a spiritual dance. The priest came running. He seemed dazed and in shock. He asked us why we were doing a heathen dance, a defilement in a sacred place. A woman asked him what his church was doing here, in our sacred place. It was sacred long before you came, she said. Those people who died here, whose bodies were thrown on top of one another, they weren't Catholics. They believed in the Great Spirit, the pipe, and the ghost dance. They weren't baptized. And you built a church over them and put a cross here. You made this a place to make money from the tourists who come to see, where all those Indians were killed. It did not take long for the feds and the goons to arrive. We could feel them surrounding us. They were setting up roadblocks. A pickup full of goons drove up, and they fired some shots at us. A few of our young guys shot back. Some shot out some streetlights to make us less visible. The war had started. At sunup the next morning, February 27th, we were already surrounded by 250 marshals and FBI with the goons hovering around the edges like jackals. Planes were flying overhead to keep tabs on us. Some of our men fired at them to keep them at a distance. We could see the APCs moving back and forth on the ridge about a mile off. Some reporters sneaked in through the federal lines. Carter Camp told me later that if it hadn't been for the presence of the press, the government would have moved in and slaughtered us as they did in 1890. It became clear that we were in for a long war. We put up our own roadblock, placing a row of old burned-out cars across the road. Then we built our bunkers. The feds had their own bunkers. The main one was Red Arrow on the Denby Road, which served as their headquarters. They had the whole area crisscrossed with tripwires. When somebody tried to sneak in and stumbled on one of those wires, a flare went up, turning the night into day. They also had sharpshooters out there, with infrared sniper scopes and attack dogs. Even so, they could never seal the area off. People got in and out with supplies all the time. Sometimes parties were guided in by Severt Young Bear or Oscar Bear Runner. They knew the land and could tell where they were going by the moon and the stars. People walked 10 or 15 miles from the drop-off points with their heavy packs. Some walked in their socks through the snow, making as little noise as possible. They knew all the little gullies and washes to come in unseen. The feds called this Ames Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was these backpackers who kept us alive. Our clinic was just a 2-room, 1-story building. One room was supposed to be the surgery, and I was the surgeon. The clinic was run by Lorelei Decora, who is now a nurse at the Rosebud Tribal Hospital. Madonna Gilbert was her main assistant. Both were Lakota women. Every week, a team of 1 or 2 white doctors or medics came into Wounded Knee to help. This was arranged by the National Council of Churches. The doctors were closely searched before the feds let them in. During firefights, with thousands of rounds coming in, the medics made up first aid kits and waited, ready to go in, to help the wounded and bring them out. They also made stretchers. The medics and the nurses worried about Indians walking around in the open, ignoring the bullets zipping by them. They worried about folks living in flimsy trailers and shacks with slugs coming in through the walls. They worried about women standing in line to go to the toilets, joking while the bullets flew around them. It usually took the nurses and doctors 3 days to adjust to the situation. After that, they no longer bothered with ducking and running for shelter and went about their business like the rest of us. I doctored people with Indian herbs. They are from the earth, and we are from the earth. They work better than the white man's wonder drugs. Operating was up to me. For this, I used my pocket knife, my prayers, and taiopi tawote, wound medicine. I also used an herb that numbs the flesh so that you don't feel anything. Almost right from the beginning, there was serious fighting. There were a lot of automatic weapons, and every 6th shot was a tracer bullet. It looked like long strings of lightning bugs. Things became serious as we settled in for a long standoff. It was crazy the way the government treated us. One day, there was a firefight. The next day, we were negotiating. Sometimes there was negotiating and shooting at the same time. One day, the roadblocks were up. The next, they were down. The feds would shoot somebody and then fly him out in a helicopter to the hospital in Rapid City. The FBI armed the goons and worked closely with them. But the marshals would have nothing to do with those murderous, drunken bums. The feds would curse us over the radio, and the next moment chat and joke with us. Witko wasichu, crazy white men, was all we could say. We could not figure them out. On March 3rd, the government sent in Colonel Volney Warner, Chief of Staff of the 82nd Airborne, to see whether the Army would be needed to make an end of us. Warner turned out to be good for us. He changed the FBI order from shoot to kill to shoot to wound, and then to do not shoot at all. He reported that the Indians weren't going to harm anyone. He thought that it was unlawful to use the Army in a local domestic conflict. He told the marshals, "You guys are only good for handing out subpoenas. You ain't worth a shit as fighting men." He said he would only be too glad to let the airborne loose upon the goons. In the end, the FBI, the marshals, and the goons hated Warner more than they hated us. Without Warner, you would not be listening to this tape. I would be dead. On March 6th, the Fed spokesman, Erickson, told us to come out and surrender or else. He tried to scare us by ordering us to send all women and children out of Wounded Knee before darkness fell on March 8th. But he didn't impress us. Dennis asked the women if they wanted to leave. Not one of them did. Carter Camp told the feds, "I know we can't whip the whole United States, but we'll sell our lives as dear as we can." We ran up an AIM flag on the church steeple. I painted the faces of our warriors with sacred red paint. Some of the people remembered Crazy Horse's old war cry, "It's a good day to die." Then the government backed down, and negotiations started all over again. They led to nothing. March 11th was the day we proclaimed the independent Oglala Nation under the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie that the government had broken. We declared Wounded Knee a liberated country and offered Oglala citizenship to everyone who was there with us. Dennis said, "This is no longer a perimeter. It's a border." We issued visas to members of the press. Russell Means declared, "If any foreign country, especially the United States, tries to enter the village, it will be considered an act of war and treated accordingly. Spies entering the village will be treated as spies anywhere." The 6 nations of the Iroquois at once recognized the independent Oglala Nation and sent a delegation to support us, led by Chief Oren Lines of the Onondaga. So we established what Dennis called a provisional government. In the meantime, we tried to establish a routine of daily living. The women were cooking as long as there was food. They made blankets out of old skirts. They made mittens out of old sweaters with trigger fingers on them. They made socks out of the sleeves and headgear with holes for eyes, nose, and mouth. This was for the guys in the bunkers. The women would go down to the bunkers to see if the men needed coffee, blankets, or ammo. Every time a flare went up, the guys would yell, "Hit the floor!" But no one bothered. The women were really strong. During one firefight, one woman held off several marshals with an old 6-shooter, while everybody else got away. She was real good with a gun. For the first 3 weeks we had enough food. After that, it was rice and beans. And then not even that. At first we ate a lot of fry bread, and that was okay. But the women ran out of the shortening, flour, and baking powder. Then we ran out of coffee, sugar, and cigarettes. Things got real bad. Without coffee and cigarettes, even the greatest warrior can't get it together anymore. It's a question of how long you can stand up on an empty stomach. The occupation was based on Indian religion. The sweat lodges were going 24 hours a day. And we had Yuwipi ceremonies almost every night, and even a few peyote meetings. When things got really bad, men and women made flesh offerings. The leaders went so far as to pierce their chests, as in the Sundance, thinking that their pain could help the people through spiritual power. Our medicine was strong. On April 5th, we signed an agreement with Kent Frizzell, the government negotiator. The White House big shots would not come to the Knee to talk to us, but we would send a delegation to Washington to meet with them there, so we smoked the pipe together. I told Frizzell, many hundreds of years ago, the white man and Indians smoked the pipe. Now today we smoke the pipe again. Before we smoke, I will blow the eagle bone whistle that has been given to the Indian people. At this time, Great Spirit, there are many, many things that we ask for. Many, many days we've been here at Wounded Knee, at this sacred altar, the sacred circle. At this time, Grandfather, I ask you to take care of my Indian people, my red man. On the same day we would lay down our arms, the feds would withdraw their armored personnel carriers, and the marshals and the FBI would go home. Our delegation took off for Washington. It consisted of Russell Means, Chief Tom Badcobb, our Sioux lawyer Raymond Rubidoux, Judy Bridewell, and myself. The talks in Washington came to nothing. Nixon would not see us, and talks with his underlings were just hot air. April 11th was a happy day for us. A new little warrior had joined us. Mary Ellen Moore Bravebird, an 18-year-old Rosebud girl, had given birth to a boy. She had come to Wounded Knee to have her baby there. That was her contribution to our struggle. They held the baby out the window for all to see, while the drum was going and the crowd sang the AIM song. Pedro Bissonette and Dennis Banks had tears in their eyes. They told me that later, because on that day I was in Washington. I did not get back to the Knee until the 19th, and I had to sneak in. Mary named the baby Three Feathers. But later, after Pedro Bissonette had been murdered by the goons, she changed her boy's name to Pedro. In the beginning, the feds had let some food and medical supplies through. But as the ring tightened, they tried to starve us out. They got a court order that made it illegal to bring supplies to us. Supporters on the outside organized an airlift. The first, which took place early in April, delivered 400 pounds of food into Wounded Knee. The machine was a single-engine plane piloted by a Vietnam vet. The co-pilot and navigator was also a Nam vet. April 26 saw the biggest shootout of the whole siege. It was started by the goons who fired at the Fed's position. This provoked the marshals and FBI to open up on us with automatic weapons. The night was lit up by flares and crisscrossed with tracer bullets. The shooting went on and on. The next day, I learned that Buddy Lamont had been killed. I had always known inside of me that a Lakota friend of mine would lose his life, but the news still hit me hard. Lawrence, Buddy Lamont, was an Oglala from Pine Ridge, a Marine and a Vietnam veteran. He was 31 years old. He had been shot through the heart and died instantly. Buddy was an only son. He received his honorable discharge in the mail, just at about the time he was hit. Buddy was shot early in the morning close to his last stand bunker. A sniper from one of the Fed's positions had pinned him down. He jumped up trying to draw fire so that he could locate the sniper and shoot back, and was hit. Buddy had known that he was not to come out of the Knee alive. Maybe a spirit told him. Maybe the owl had called him. He had told friends, if something happens to me, I want to stay at Wounded Knee. Don't make a fuss over me. Just bury me in my bunker. With the sacred pipe in my hand, I chanted the prayers over him in our Lakota language. Buddy Lamont is buried close to that long trench containing the bones of Chief Bigfoot and the 300 ghost dancers, men, women, and children. He is there with the spirits. His burial took place 2 days before the long siege ended. Later, a headstone was put up over his grave. It bears his Army serial number and the name of his unit. It also says, 2,000 came here to Wounded Knee. 1 stayed. The end was near. On April 29th, the trading post burned down together with everything in it. A kerosene lamp had fallen over and set fire to the place. Nothing but black ashes remained. The electricity was gone. The food was gone. Our ammo was nearly gone. The earth was scorched. The women and children were at the point of total exhaustion. Most of the press had left. They were now more interested in Watergate. There was a steady trickle of brothers walking out during the night with their weapons, in order to escape arrest when the end came. Some of the leaders were no longer there. Russell Means had been prevented from returning after we had been in Washington, where Nixon had refused to see us. Dennis Banks managed to walk out at the last moment. An agreement was signed. We would have to lay down our arms, surrender, and submit to arrest. In return, the government made promises that meant little and were not kept. Stan Holder told me that the people wept when the agreement was signed. They knew it was just another treaty that would be broken. 40 people walked out during the last night. They tried to get through where nobody ever went because the area was too open. But they set off a tripwire flare. Some marshals opened up on them and did not even wait for them to hit the ground. I still can't figure out why nobody was hurt. They all made it to Porcupine, and from there scattered themselves to wherever they had a home. I was glad for them. I could have walked out with the others without any trouble. But I had signed that agreement. I couldn't walk out on my words. Stand down happened on Friday, June 8th, 1973. On that day, 146 men and women laid down their arms and surrendered. Not a shot was fired. All was quiet. The feds took down our 4-color AIM flag and raised the American flag. A marshal made some kind of victory speech. With a helicopter whirling overhead, the marshals and FBI in full battle dress swarmed all over the place, looking for booby traps and holdouts. They thought some of us were hiding in the ruins. The feds rummaged through the debris. Finally, a loud voice came over the loudspeaker. "Gentlemen, the village of Wounded Knee is secured." The feds lined us up for processing. Everybody was questioned, searched, and fingerprinted. Wallace Blackwell told him that he was a medicine man. They slammed him against the side of a car, ripped his headband off, and took away his medicine bundle and sacred things. Carter Camp and I were the last ones to be helicoptered out. I was handcuffed and the cuffs fastened to a waist chain. My legs and feet were also chained. I asked them, "Are you that much afraid of me?" Trussed up like this, I was the last of the hostiles to leave the knee. We never got our Black Hills back. The Treaty of Fort Laramie was not honored, nor did the government recognize us as an independent nation. And yet I think that this was the greatest moment in my life, and that our 71-day stand was the greatest deed done by Native Americans in this century. Of the Wounded Knee of 1973, nothing is left. Of the Sacred Heart Church, only the square hole that was once the basement remains. The trading post, the museum, the wooden house that was our clinic, the gas station are all gone. Patches around what had been the perimeter are today just black scorched earth where nothing will ever grow again. But Wounded Knee lives on in our hearts. After having been taken in a copter, chained and handcuffed, to Rapid City and the Pennington County Jail, I was released. I went back to Crow Dog's paradise, but that was not the end. A short time later, after the Sundance, Mary Ellen Moore moved in with me, together with her little boy. We were married Indian style, not in a church, but with a blanket around our shoulders holding on to the pipe. The 3 years following Wounded Knee were years of fear, fighting, and tension, the bloodiest years in my experience. In early October, Aloysius Long Soldier was shot to death at Kyle by unknown goons. On October 17th, my friend, the Oglala civil rights leader, Pedro Bissonette, was provoked by a man at White Clay, Nebraska, who made racist remarks and shoved him around. Pedro knocked the man down. This served as a pretext for the BIA cops to waylay him at a roadblock, killing Pedro with a shotgun blast. Pedro's sister-in-law, Jeanette Bissonette, a mother of 6, was shot and killed by a sniper's bullet as she changed a tire on a lonely road. Matthew King, a respected elder and tribal interpreter, had 20 rounds fired into his house. He called it a miracle that he wasn't hit. On June 26, 1975, occurred the big shootout at Oglala, on the Pine Ridge Reservation, during which 2 FBI agents and 1 Indian were shot and killed. Oglala, in the northwest corner of the reservation, is a small village of mostly traditional full-bloods. The goons were especially hard on them. The people there asked AIM for help and protection. By this time, things had come to such a pass that any little incident could set off an explosion. The reservation was swarming with goons, tribal police, FBI, and SWAT teams. The way the shootout happened had to be a setup. There is no other way to explain it. The feds were determined to wipe out the AIM camp. They had a media blitz going, preparing the minds of white people for what was to come. They said the camp was made up of a bunch of heavily armed renegades who had built bunkers. There were no bunkers, just an old root cellar. The Feds talked about fortifications and entrenchments. These existed only in their imagination. Attorney General Janklow said,
Best thing to do with an AIM member is to put a gun to his head and pull the trigger.
On the evening of June 25th, 2 FBI agents drove up to Jumping Bull's place. They went into people's homes without warrants, saying they were looking for a kid, Jimmy Eagle, who they said had stolen a pair of old cowboy boots. Now, to come into that place at that time, looking for a pair of stolen boots was crazy. The Feds, of course, had other reasons. They wanted to provoke the Indians to a fight so that the FBI would have grounds for going in there and making an end of that camp. The agents were watched by some members of the AIM camp. Looking down from the top of a ridge, it made them uneasy and they drove away. During the night, there were heavy storms, thundering and lightning, as if some spirits were trying to warn the people. On the morning of June 26th, 2 FBI cars drove up to the camp. They were driven by Special Agents Ron Williams and Jack Collar. What was bound to happen, happened. It doesn't matter now who fired the first shot, the agents or the AIM men. The agents had gotten themselves into a situation they could not handle. They were screaming into their two-way radios to their backup cars. "We're drawing fire! Come quick or we're dead men!" But their backups didn't come. When the firing finally stopped, Kohler and Williams were lying dead near their cars. Later, the body of an Indian, Joe Stuntz, was found in a mud puddle where the Feds had dumped him. In no time, the whole area was swarming with agents and police. People afterward could never figure out how they arrived so quickly on the scene. They had to have been ready for this confrontation. The death of a human, whether Indian or white, is a tragedy. But I have a strange feeling that Kohler and Williams were set up by their own people as a sacrifice, to have a reason to make an end of AIM. The whole crowd of agents, tribal police and goons formed a ring around the area, searching the gullies and ravines for AIM members. It seemed they covered every foot of ground so thoroughly that not even a mouse could have gotten through. But somehow, the people from the camp, led by Leonard Peltier, cut their way through during the night, finding shelter and a hiding place wherever they went, in Pine Ridge, Rosebud, and as far away as Cheyenne River Reservation. Peltier and most men in his group were sundancers. Peltier had first danced in Pierce the year before. That meant he would have to sundance 3 more years, because you make your vow for 4 years in a row. According to the traditional Lakota way, I had to let Peltier come to Crow Dog's Paradise to fulfill his vow. The FBI knew that he was there, and they did not like it. They did not like me or my father either, for letting him dance at our place. They came to Crow Dog's Paradise at dawn on September 5th, 1975. 185 of them, FBI, marshals, and SWAT teams. They came in full battle dress and flak vests. They came with helicopters, heavily tracked vehicles, trucks, and even rubber boats to prevent the Indians from escaping across the Little White River. Some even came down the hill under an artificial smokescreen. I woke up when I heard a shout. "This is the FBI! Come out with your hands up or we'll shoot!" Some agents smashed the windows of my house and climbed in. Others broke down the doors. They dragged me out of my bed. I was sleeping in the nude, but they would not let me dress. They pushed me down on the floor and held an M16 to my head. They put plastic handcuffs on me, the kind that tighten with every movement and cut off your circulation. They put M16s to my wife's head. They dragged 3-year-old Pedro from under his blanket and threw him against the wall. He was crying. Mary wanted to go to him and comfort him, but the Feds would not let her. One FBI agent kept asking me again and again, "Who shot those agents? Who shot Collar and Williams?" I told them I didn't know. I was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa at the time. They kept on. "Where's Peltier? We know he's around here somewheres. You're hiding him." When I said truthfully that he wasn't there, They dragged me by the hair out of the house and tied me to a tree. I was still naked. There were women and children around, weeping. Some of the women were only half dressed. They searched even the children. My wife tried to bring me some clothes, but the feds wouldn't let anyone come near me. Choppers were landing and taking off in my yard. The feds were wrecking houses, teepees, and cars. They shot my old horse, Big Red, out of sheer meanness. He had been the kid's pet. My dad tried to bring me my pipe, but the feds stopped him. They looked into my beaded pipe bag, saying, "There might be a gun in it." I told them I was a medicine man and allowed no weapons on my place, but they paid no attention. My wife asked them to show her their search warrants. They did not have any, only blank arrest orders against John Doe and Jane Doe. As usual, we had people staying at the Paradise, and wherever I looked, I saw men and boys tied to trees. There wasn't one tree without somebody tied to it. And what happened at my place happened down the road, a half-mile away at my sister Dinah's place. She and her husband Al had their kids there, Frankie and little Colleen, and several guests. The feds brought all of those they arrested at my sister's place over to the Paradise, where they put us all in squad cars and took us to Pierre, the state capital. At Pierre, they put me into jail awaiting trial. They cooked up 3 phony charges against me. Much later, I found out the reason for the big raid. An informer had told the FBI that Peltier was hiding on my place. They searched the Paradise and miles around it with choppers, dogs, and rows of men. But they didn't find him for the very simple reason that he wasn't there. Because the FBI goofed, I had to go through 3 trials and spend time in jail. But I think regardless of Peltier, they would have found a way to put me away. Because as spiritual medicine man, I was a greater danger to them than our political leaders. My mother, who was in her 70s at the time, watched the whole thing. They were looking for Peltier, she said, but he wasn't there. He wasn't anywhere near Rosebud. Because they couldn't find Peltier, they took my boy. That was a very bad day for us and for Rosebud. After Wounded Knee, the word went out from the FBI to the Justice Department and the courts. Prosecute, prosecute, prosecute. No matter if you can't get a conviction, prosecute. If one AIM leader is acquitted on one charge, try him for another. Don't dismiss cases that are weak or not worth the effort. Keep AIM in court all the time. Keep them busy so they can't do their civil rights campaigns. Prosecute not only the big guys, but also the foot soldiers, the little people. Out of every 100 Indian civil rights cases, only 7 led to convictions. It did not matter that it jammed up the courts and wasted the taxpayers' money, just as long as it kept us involved in trial after trial and ate up our supporters' money. No case was too insignificant. I was first to be tried for having defended my home when the feds came looking for Leonard Peltier. The trial took place in Pierre. The presiding judge was Robert Marriage, whose court was in Richmond, Virginia. The government probably picked Marriage because he knew nothing about the situation of Indians on the reservation, or about AIM, or about me and my background. The government had instructed him to run several AIM-connected federal cases as quickly as possible, and he did. He tried a case against Russell Means in the same courtroom, on the same day as my case. The jury found me and Coke Millard guilty. The next morning, the judge made the point that although I was not myself physically involved in the fight, because I was a leader and medicine man with influence on the young people, I should have prevented it. He sentenced me to 5 years. I was immediately dragged off in chains and handcuffs, without even a chance to say goodbye to my family and friends. The government still wasn't satisfied. They wanted to make sure that I would go to prison for a long time. So they cooked up another charge against me. On the morning of March 25th, 1975, my wife Mary and I had driven to Pierre on some business. We got back about 11:30 p.m. and found the house full of strangers, 2 young white women and an unkempt vagrant-type man. Mary went into the kitchen to cook something for us to eat, and I went across to my mom's for a moment. When I returned, Mary was busy at the stove. The man put an arm around Mary and grabbed her in front. I hit him. He hit me back and split my lip. There was a chain from a chainsaw hanging on the wall. He grabbed it and came at me with it. I held onto his arm so that he couldn't use the chain, but it cut my hand. At that moment, some of my friends came in. They gave him a few good whacks and threw him and his friends out of the house. We heard a car starting and thought that was the end of it. It was not. The Raggedy Man's name was Royer Woody Fursick, and he brought a charge against me for aggravated assault and battery. The trial was held in January 1976 at Rapid City. At court, we again had Judge Robert Merridge. The judge was in a hurry. He questioned the jurors himself. "Are you prejudiced against Indians? You're not? Fine. You're in. Please take a seat." The all-white jury came in with a guilty verdict, and I got 5 more years. It took a lot of long, hard work and devotion to get me out of the hole the government had dug for me. When I finally got home, the whole tribe honored me with a feast and giveaway. 2 spiritual men, Wallace Black Elk and Bill Eagle Feathers, ran the ceremony. All my relations were there, all my friends. The tribal chairman and vice chairman had come. And Father Whithoft, who had supported me through all my trials. Richard Erdos had flown in from New York. Many people wore their traditional outfits. Bill Eagle Feathers and Dallas Chief Eagle had their war bonnets on, besides wearing their beaded and quilled rawhide outfits. Many others wore their old fringed buckskins, breechcloths, and even ancient bone breastplates of their grandfathers. I wore my ribbon shirt and an old peace medal on my breast. In my hair I wore an eagle tail feather, together with the plumes of 3 other birds. My pipe bag hung from my belt. The women wore their beautiful deer-hide dresses or many-colored fringed dance shawls. It was a great sight. Black Elk and Eagle Feathers fanned me off with their eagle wings and smoked me up with sage and sweetgrass. My father helped them. We smoked the pipe and partook of the sacred food. Soon after came the Sundance, the most sacred of all our rituals. The Sundance is a sacrifice. You undergo the pain to make a sick relative well, or to bring a son back alive from war. I danced so that my people should live. I danced for our survival. For many years, the government forbade the Sundance. They called it barbaric, savage, superstitious. Indians were jailed if they were caught sundancing. Even to purify oneself in a sweat lodge was a crime. But it never stopped us from performing our sacred rituals. We danced in secret, where the Wasichu could not find us. During all the long years when our religion was outlawed, somewhere, in hidden places, the Lakota were dancing. My father danced across the river. At Picket Pin's place, he danced up on the hills among the pines. He danced way out on the prairie, in hidden valleys, in clearings among ancient cottonwoods. If you look for them, you can still find the traces of our old dance circles. My father's dances were always prayers for all the people. Ever since 1971, in early August, there has been a Sundance at Crow Dog's Paradise. But the one in 1977, just after my release, had a special meaning for me. Bill Eagle Feathers ran it. The sacred tree was brought in, the tallest cottonwood they could find. They planted it in a hole filled with buffalo fat and the 4 kinds of sacred food. Chief Eagle Feathers prayed for an eagle to bless us, and at once a large bald eagle appeared, flying in from the east, circling over the Sundance ground, and then disappearing slowly toward the west. More than 100 dancers had come, all in their red kilts with wreaths of sage crowning their heads, blowing on their eagle bone whistles, making a sound of 1,000 birds. The drum pounded, uniting us all in its heartbeat. The singers intoned the Sundance song. Wakantanka, Unchimala, ye, Wanikta cha, lecha muelo. Creator, have pity on me. I shall live. That is why I am doing this. We danced so that our Lakota nation should live. We took upon us the suffering of our brothers and sisters in the white man's jails. I danced looking at the sun until my mind was filled by a bright light from another world. I communicated with the grandfather spirit and with the stars. I danced with the tree. It talked to me. I was outside myself, way beyond myself, seeing the world with Shante Ishta, the eye of the heart, not the eyes of the face. I called out to the eagles. When I finally finished, a great shout rose from the people. I had come home. I end my story here, at the high point of my life. I will never dance again as I danced. There will never be another Wounded Knee. I became what I had been before I gave myself to the movement. A medicine man, performing the ancient ceremonies for my Lakota people. Pedro and my teenage son Anwe already run Yuipi and Native American church meetings. They know all the songs. They will follow on my trail when I am gone. Clearwater and Buddy Lamont are looking down on me. Raymond Yellow Thunder and Pedro Bissonette are looking down on me. Much of what I am doing for them. Donka Sheila, Wamayanka yo, Lemiye, Cha, Nawajin, Yellow, he, Donka Sheila, Wamayanka yo, Lemiye, Cha, Nawajin, Yellow, he. Grandfather, behold me. This is me. I am standing. Grandfather, behold me. This is me. Standing up. Mita kuye oya sin. All my relatives.